Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Movie Mates podcast. I am Matthew, joined by my wonderful co-host and best friend.
Callum.
Hey man, great to see you. So today it's the first of a multi-part series arc again for us. It's going to be our biggest arc thus far. So I'm going to pass over to my friend Callum to explain what the arc's going to be and what movies we're going to be talking about today and sort of in the future. So Callum, off to you, buddy.
Yeah, so as Matthew said, a huge number of parts to this series, and it'll probably be the biggest series that we'll record for a long time, I'd say.
Absolutely.
From the past and to the future, I would say this will be one for the Movie Mates history books.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Love
and today we're kicking off our series of Walt Disney Animation Studios films. So we're talking about the four earliest entries into the Walt Disney Animated Studios films. That's a difficult thing to say. What does the thumbnail say? Does it
Say
just
that
say
five
Disney
times
films?
fast.
Does it just say like Disney animated films?
Go for it. Love it.
Yep. So the first four entries into that series in this part one. So we'll be talking about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Pinocchio, Fantasia, and Dumbo. This
Oh,
was
this is
I was
painful.
reluctant to watch these films for obvious reasons. I don't often deal well with older films just because we're young,
Yeah,
we're finely tuned to the
absolutely.
modern way of
That's a good
filmmaking. So
point.
sort of going back many generations can be somewhat difficult. And there's good examples of groundbreaking films here, that still hold up to this day, and there are some ones that really don't. What were
Absolutely.
your overall thoughts today, Matthew?
Yeah, so I would say these are probably like the earliest, the oldest films we've done. Like these are what, like late 30s, early 40s. So we haven't really ventured this far back into film filmmaking really in general. So but yeah, these are probably four very certainly three very well regarded classic films in general. But as always with as always with the Movie Mates
Did you
channel,
say three well regarded? You're like three well regarded and Fantasia.
Fantasia, yeah.
Uh,
But
no,
as
Fantasia is actually regarded as one of the most groundbreaking groundbreaking films of all time.
really
It
class.
constantly tops like top 100 films of all time, and
Wow.
I don't get it, but
No, me
okay.
neither. Yeah, that's the thing. As with every Movie Mates, well, most Movie Mates videos, we do have some. I would say we have some hot takes here, and maybe slightly controversial opinions regarding these films because, as we said, they are quite all of them are well regarded. But yeah, did you just want to? Well, before we hop in, I suppose, thank you to everyone who has supported us recently. Shout out to our friends Ross and Cash. You guys are legends. And yeah, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and email us at moviemeetspodcast@gmail.com. That will be in the description. So, Callum, do you want to
Cash,
hop in?
if you
Oh, yeah.
want Cash, if you want on the podcast, hit us up. We
Yeah,
we
well,
would love to collab.
he's more than welcome to come on, isn't he, Callum, for any subject matter?
Yeah, we're also jealous of his sub count. So if he wants to, if he wants to do some cross promotion, we'd be into that.
Absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, do you want to hop in with our first film of the day, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs?
See, do you want to open? Obviously, we're reviewing these in a different way to normal because we can't really see these in the same way as we normally do a film.
Yeah,
Because we often we balance the quality of the film with our enjoyment of the film. But I feel like for the four films that we have today, those two scores are probably going to differ drastically. Where
absolutely.
we recognize their importance in history. They're visually groundbreaking, but we didn't particularly enjoy them. So
Exactly.
do you think for the most part today we probably need to give two scores out of
I was
10
thinking
for
exactly that, man.
quality
I
and
was thinking
enjoyment?
exactly that. And the thing is,
See, I don't think
yeah.
it's necessary for Snow White because I would say it's probably the best example of the balance between quality and enjoyment
Yeah.
of the four examples today. But
Mhm.
I would say for Fantasia, that's definitely
Oh
going to
yeah,
come
oh
up.
big time. Fantasia, I actually have this in my notes. Like, I don't know how I can review Fantasia because for me, it's not really a film, and I don't mean that because it's so
It's
bad. I just mean
not.
it's not really a film. But what I
It's
was
a
going to
2 hour
say,
music video.
yeah, exactly. And what I was going to say was because these films are so ingrained in movie culture and they're referenced so many times, I would say most people who haven't seen these films know the plot already. Like I hadn't seen any of these films before. This is my first time viewing. I don't know about you, but I think they're so famous now that the plot is well known. So for me, it is hard to rate them in that basis as well, because you know what's going to happen.
Yeah, it was exactly the same for me. I hadn't seen any of these films, but I knew the plots beat for beat just because of pop
Hmm.
culture and
Absolutely, man.
the
That's
few
the thing.
sparse scenes that I had seen.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was no shock value or surprise, but I suppose in kids' films that would have been limited anyway. Let
Yeah.
alone kids' films in the 40s.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And well, if we're getting into the first film, Snow White, like one thing I know you have a particular disliking for is slapstick humor. And I wanted to know, do you think that slapstick humor carries on in these Disney films? Like, would you describe Snow White as slapstick humor for you?
I hadn't really thought about it. There's certainly, visual and physical humor, but I wouldn't say it's egregious. I didn't have
Mhm.
an issue with it. I never thought of it, but we'll sort of get to probably. I'd say the scene that's most relevant to that's around the mid mark of the film. We'll
Sure,
we'll definitely get to that just
absolutely,
because
man.
of how sort of bizarre it is.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
if you want to talk about how the film opens, this is an incredibly groundbreaking film. They finally figured out animation and audio, and
Yeah,
yet they still open this groundbreaking generation defining film. Fuck my life, with just a still motionless card of text,
I
and
know.
I was a bit unimpressed.
Yeah.
When this is meant to be groundbreaking.
It's a great point, buddy. Like, and I guess it's really, as you said perfectly, Callum, it's really hard to rate these films because, this was, what was it, 1937, 39, roughly?
There's that vibe, yeah.
Yeah, so let's say late 30s. Like, obviously, the way the film's even constructed is different, but this film may as well be called like Exposition the movie. It is just, like you said, opens with text and it describes what's going to happen pretty much, and well, certainly gives you backstory. And I think that is good for a kids film, but for me, like, I was disappointed with that like opening. Just I think they had a real opportunity to showcase their leaps and bounds in animation, and they wasted it with the opening for me.
Yeah, I agree with you, definitely. Uh, I would say, I would say probably the biggest show-stopping things that Disney films have these days are their songs, and
Absolutely.
I'm really glad that they've moved past like this era of Disney films where the songs would just be people singing about doing mundane activities.
Yeah.
There's probably like a 3-minute song about her looking into a well, and then people baking and cleaning and shit, or like washing themselves. I just don't find that particularly interesting, especially when songs these days in Disney films are used so effectively for character development.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen in Moana is probably one of the better examples of that. Like, it's the sort of sound mixing and the way the songs are fit into the actual plot are fantastic. But for me in this film, it feels like there's songs just for the sake of having songs. And maybe that's me looking back on it in like from a 2020 perspective. But for me, actually, ironically enough, the song where she's talking about like I'm wishing by a well, that's probably my favorite of the film. And uh, but for me, that's like the only good song in the film for me. And to be fair, the voice actress who plays Snow White, she's a fantastic singer. If it's the same person, and I think she does a really good role as the character. But yeah, I don't know, man. Like the mundane action, the mundane sort of ideas of the songs, it was lacking, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I would say the most, revolutionary, astounding thing about this film is the animation, particularly in the dwarves. Like they're also expressionate, individual, unique. And
Absolutely.
then you look at Snow White's face, which
It's just
lacks
two
all
dots for nose.
definition.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, her face just has no shape. It's completely undefined, ununique. Is that a
absolutely.
word?
Let's
You
go with
know,
it. Let's go with it.
yeah, there's just nothing about her face, when compared to every other character in the film. So you would have thought you would have paid closest attention to that character design.
Yeah, I have the exact same point in my notes, buddy. I think you've hit the nail on the head there because I think for the title character, or for one of the title characters of the film, I think her animation is especially lacking. For me, actually, I think that the evil queen is probably my favorite character in the film in terms of character art. Well, in terms of character development and certainly animation wise, I think she looks really. I think she looks really she certainly stands out from the background, I would say. And one thing I have to praise the film for is how like the film characterizes the characters by the animals that surround them. You know, Snow White's is basically followed by animals of the forest, you know, cute deers, tortoises, squirrels, whereas the queen, the queen, evil queen's, you know, surrounded by rats and vultures. I thought that was really cool. I actually really thought that was quite clever. It's a bit on the nose, but I liked it.
Yeah, we know Matthew always empathizes with the psycho murderers. You know, they're always his vibe. You know, he's like, I wish this person had died. This was hilarious. You know, I respect it, Matthew.
Awful stepmother for being jealous of her own like daughter's beauty. That's a thing.
See,
Like, what?
is she her stepmother in this, or was that sort of just, you know, re-established continuity that, you know, was decided later on? Because they say that she's obviously the queen and that Snow White's a princess, but they don't say that, you know, they belong to the same kingdom or anything.
Yeah.
Because obviously, you know, we see people from other kingdoms, because obviously the prince isn't going to be, you know, her brother or something.
Yeah,
Hopefully,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, actually, maybe, who knows?
Maybe.
You know, because I mean, you know, they seem to know each other without having spoken to each other. So I mean,
It's a
maybe
good
there
point,
is some
man.
sort of weird familial connection. You know, they're sort of
Absolutely. Yeah.
shying away from each other because they're cousins. Let's
Uh,
move on. Uh,
has there
I do
ever
have to
been
say,
any? Sorry, man.
oh yeah,
Has there
oh
ever
no
been
no.
any like familial connection to like Snow White's dad? Has that ever been established or anything? No.
Just, you know, like an explanation in the films or
Yeah.
for the films.
Or just in by the.
Well, I mean, yeah, to my knowledge, you know, there hasn't been any Snow White sequels or, you know, canonical further appearances. Uh, but, you know, say in the Once Upon a Time, I don't know if you've heard of Once Upon a Time, but it was sort of a modern reimagining of all these fairy tales, and then they
No?
like dropped them in, you know, they dropped them in Maine in America, and, you know, all of them had, you know, their memories wiped, and,
Oh,
you
cool.
know, it was a whole, it's a really great show.
Cool.
And then in that film, you know, Snow White's dad, I think, was killed by the evil
Oh,
queen
really?
because she
Okay.
didn't get to be with her true love. So she just married him for his power and his money. You know, and
Yeah.
like to sort of ruin Snow White's life.
The classics.
To be fair, Snow White deserved it in that. You know, if you haven't seen it, watch Once Upon a Time. She
Yeah.
deserved it.
But like, what point were you gonna make there before I interrupted you, bro?
Oh, by the way, I was speaking to Cash the other day, and he just said like apparently we interrupt each other a lot. I think it's just my pure aggression.
No,
Often, like when I
it's
don't like a film, I'm just
it's
like,
probably my ignorance as well. To be fair, I've just done it again. Shit.
no, no, it's fine. No, it's just when I don't like a film, I'm like, no, I'm gonna keep talking.
I will try my best not to do it because I know I do it quite a lot. So from now on, I'm starting a new leaf in the podcast. Go ahead, Cal.
But you know, hatred isn't the case for this film because despite what I've said about it so far, and probably will what I will go on to say about it, I actually really enjoyed this film for what it is.
Yeah,
But I really respect that, you know, right from the get go, like the plot, you know, goes at like a clip. You know, there's no like meandering plot time, except for one example that we'll get onto. But you know, they establish that, you know, the queen is jealous and that she's a princess, and then she runs into the forest within like the first 5 to 7 minutes of the movie. You know, like what I would consider probably like one third of the plot takes place in, you know, in the first 10 minutes of the film.
yeah. I think you're right there, buddy. I think that's both a blessing and a curse because it's a really fast tempo. Everything happens like that. But then I think that leaves a good 45-minute portion of the film where absolutely nothing happens and it's just songs about washing dwarves' hands. You know, I think that's a
Yeah,
real issue for the film. So I think the pacing is definitely an issue. But one thing I would have liked, in a sort of similar style to how Pinocchio and Dumbo unfold, I would say they operate at a more faster pace. I would have liked to see that. I would have liked to see the pace of the first third of this film, you know, develop more and sort of continue because I think it would have been better in my eyes if it was to the tempo of the first sort of opening 10 minutes.
yeah, I definitely agree. You know, I would say a lot of these films are, you know, incredibly short. You know, they have an average of like, you know, 70 to 90 minutes. You know,
Mhm.
that's sort of the average Disney length. But
Yeah,
often they could still do with a bit of an edit. You know, that like
absolutely.
they could easily be less, and, you know, still have the same message behind them. Because as you said, probably the most egregiously long sequence in this film is just the dwarves washing themselves for 10 full minutes.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, well, the one thing about the dwarves, like they're very iconic characters in themselves, and like you said perfectly, but Callum, that you can definitely see that each of the dwarves' personalities reflected. And I kind of wanted to ask you, like, who is your favorite dwarf presented in the film?
I suppose Grumpy is probably my favorite because he's actually the only one that has any kind of development.
Mhm.
All of them start as sort of horny for Snow White, and that's how they end.
Yeah.
He starts not horny for Snow White and ends horny for Snow White. So that's at least a character
Yeah.
arc.
Yeah.
So I have to respect that at the least.
Absolutely.
But one person that I hate especially is Doc because I feel
Yeah.
like historically he receives a lot of respect. But I mean, I feel like they should rename him Dopey because he seems entirely inept at everything he tries to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. I actually quite like Dopey. I feel really bad for him. And Doc seems to somewhat pass the blame on to Dopey, or at least give him the most opportunity to fail, which I felt bad for.
Also, all of them have beards and look old as shit, but Dopey looks like a baby. So
Yeah.
when they're calling him Dopey, is he secretly just a baby that they've used for child labor? And then they're just saying, "Nah, he's such a dumb prick." And I'm like, or is he 1 years old? Or is he one year
Yeah.
old?
Yeah, because I know it, like there's a very strange visual of the film that all the dwarves are identical in the sense that they have like a beard but no mustache, and they've got like all the same haircuts, and they're roughly, I would say, they're the same age. But then, as you said, Dopey, no hair, no beard, looks like 2 years old. So I don't know. I'd love to hear the lore of that.
Yeah, I would. And obviously, we're introduced to them, working away in the mine, singing their famous song.
Yeah.
But my real question is, what is their purpose? Because they're mining for diamonds, but we never see them trade that for money or for food. Like, what value do diamonds have in like the
Yeah.
forest? And also,
Yeah.
like they find rubies and like toss them over their shoulder like they're nothing. It's like, do you think that they're worthless? Yeah,
Yeah.
I just don't understand. What are they trading this for?
I know, I know. Like it sort of seems like they're doing it for their own pleasure, but then how are they making a living? Maybe they're just getting supplies from the natural world and the forest and stuff. And like on that point, like we see like the animals help Snow White bake, and I just thought, with all the pandemic going on, it sort of made everyone consider hygiene a bit more. And I sort of thought, I hope all those animals have washed their paws when they're helping them bake, because there might be a lot of infectious diseases to spread into that gooseberry pie.
Yeah, I'm hoping, combined with like the temperature of the oven, but also like how are you heating the fucking oven in the forest? Let's just put a pin in that. But let's hope the heat from that, and also the fact that the life expectancy is probably 20 years old. Like the dwarves are probably like 7, but they've just seen some shit.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
like they're probably exceptionally young. But as you said, maybe they just make their living by living off the fat of the land, to quote of Mice and Men,
yeah.
i.e. theft, because
Beth.
they've probably learned they've probably learned how to live as criminals from Snow White, the most polite trespasser I've ever seen.
Yeah, yeah. Like I don't know how that sort of scene kind of reminded me of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. I don't know which came before it, which came out when, but I got similar vibes there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just don't know what to do, break into someone's house.
Yeah, I'm just gonna sleep in these beds that clearly don't belong to anyone. No, wait.
Yeah, it's not a great first instinct to have.
Absolutely not. But like, I don't know. I thought, as we've sort of mentioned, buddy, there's a good 40-minute section where I just have absolutely no notes. I don't like. There's a see after the baking scene. I really don't have any notes until the queen kills herself accidentally. Like
Yeah,
I swear to God, I
I,
don't know,
I
but
I have a fair bit, to be honest.
go for it, man. Go for it.
Uh, so it confuses me. We've mentioned this in the likes of Edge of Tomorrow, and such that what one character does something exceptionally weird, but then refuses to accept something else. Like Snow White talks to animals, from the forest, but then has never allegedly heard of the existence of dwarves, despite being despite ruling the kingdom as a princess.
Yeah, yeah. Like Snow White, I get
She
that.
real dumb. She real dumb.
Because there's one line I thought was quite funny was like when she says to the dwarfs, "Oh, the queen, she'll never find me here," and I just thought, what makes you say that? Like it wasn't exactly a long walk from your kingdom. Like I'm sure that where the dwarves live is pretty close to where the queen lives, as we later find out, and it's pretty close.
And she has magic. sidekick, and you're like, silly magic.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, on that point, like, do you think this film does enough to explain the lore of this universe? Because we see, like, there's like a clear sort of classic kingdom, and like there's dwarves and stuff, but it doesn't really go further beyond that, really. It doesn't it's not a huge universe in the sense that there's not a lot of characters in this film, really. Like, the huntsman has a couple lines, the prince is barely in it. It's part of me does sort of wish that it expanded the universe more, but likewise, I think the film does a good job at giving more development to certain characters, like you mentioned, Grumpy, Snow White to a degree, and the Queen also. So I don't know. Would you like to see more characters develop? Because there's not much characters in it.
I mean, I think maybe I excuse it because this film has such a legacy that I've made my own sort of head canon where, like,
Yeah.
the characters have more backstory than the movie actually gives them.
Yeah.
So I was quite forgiving with it. How did you feel?
I would have liked to see more. I think the prince is a really interesting concept of the character, and he's barely in it, really. The huntsman seems like a nice guy as well, But I don't
Yes,
know.
he's played by the exceptionally charming Jamie Dornan on Once Upon a Time.
Yeah. Oh, cool, cool, cool. I don't know if you've seen, like, what are the modern Snow White retellings, like Snow White and the Huntsman or something? Is that it? The Chris Hemsworth one?
Yes, that's the Chris Hemsworth one.
I'm a big fan of those, to be honest. I think I've seen one, and I think I've seen the second one, but I've definitely seen the first one, and I was a big fan of it. I think it's a good modern retelling of it. Have you seen them?
I haven't seen those, but what one that I would really like to see is another one that was called Mirror Mirror, and it had
Oh, I've
Julia
heard of that one.
Roberts
Yeah.
as the evil queen and Lily Collins from Love Rosie,
Oh, cool, cool, cool.
Snow White. To be fair, I do criticize them though for naming their movie after the Mandela effect for this film, where people
Mm.
think that it's Mirror Mirror instead of Magic Mirror. So they have kind of fucked up tremendously there.
Isn't Yeah, because that's like there's another bit of, isn't it, like, so society sort of, was that similar thing with, like, Star Wars, wasn't it, with Vader and Luke, wasn't it?
Yeah, in the scene in Empire Strikes Back where Vader says, "No, I am your father," people remember it as Luke, "I am your father." There's lots of videos on the internet about the Mandela effect. If you're interested, go search those up, viewers. I'm not demanding that of you, Matthew. I know you understand the
I
situation, but
understand, yeah.
yes, this is a very popular one, and probably one that uh, that I was also guilty of until probably a few years ago when it was pointed out to me.
It's interesting because I think the magic mirror, in some instances, I think I don't know whether to call it he or it. It looks really cool, and I think it's an interesting concept as well, because it's sort of, it's not necessarily a bad character. It just tells the queen, like, its own vision. So it's sort of a morally ambiguous character, which I quite like.
But also she refers to him as like the slave in the mirror. So I don't know why you're not like placating someone who calls you their slave.
Yeah.
Like I would probably just be like, I'd be like, yeah, you looking good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's the queen's like, you know, I don't even know what came out of my mouth there. It was just a bunch of noises.
Me talking about Artemis Fowl, just
Looking back on that review, we weren't brutal enough, were we? We were. We should have slated that way more.
it's a really bad film. I think to say that it had like a 4 out of 10 for quality, I think that was very generous.
I was reading the comments that those other channels had left. I was like, yeah, I was probably way too generous in that, that film.
Well, I mean, didn't we both give it like a 0 out of 10 for enjoyment?
Yeah,
Like that was probably fair enough.
yeah.
Uh, but yes, we were talking about the magic mirror, telling the truth sometimes to its own detriment. But as we're quite aware, the queen has the magical power to turn herself into a withered hag. So surely she could use the same magic to just make herself more visually appealing than
Exactly. That's
Snow
what I was
White.
thinking. Yeah, because she says,
Is it
like,
just that she's so vain that she needs to have the knowledge that it's her natural beauty that's
maybe,
superior?
maybe, and like, it's sort of a weird one, because she's like, in her, for her philosophy, she wants to be considered the most beautiful in the land, but then she's like, I'm gonna make myself less good looking by turning myself into an old woman with an apple. I think there's plenty of other ways to, you know I don't even think she needs to improve her beauty. You know, she's you know, there's you know, she looks as a good looking lady. You know, and
Was
also like
was she your animated movie crush as a child?
no. Did you ever have? That's a good question. Did you ever have an animated movie crush?
Oh, really? Uh, are you gonna expose me like this?
Yeah, he
I
was.
mean,
I'll tell you
like,
mine.
do you have an answer? Oh, I'll say mine first. It wasn't a movie
Oh.
crush, but I didn't have the Disney Channel, but I was a big fan. You know, I'd watch it on YouTube, and I don't
Yeah.
know, Kim Possible I found very appealing.
Love it, love it. Mine was
You know, she could do ninja shit. You know, she seemed nice. You know.
yeah. Well, I don't know who was mine. Mine was probably. Do you remember Lazy Town?
Oh no.
Mine was
Yeah.
Stephanie from Lazy Town. Yeah. So there you go, viewers, an insight into our lives. Hope you guys enjoyed.
I was reading about Lazy Town the other day because she was on a list of characters that were played by much older actresses than you think. So the character of Stephanie in Lazy Town is meant to be 8 years old apparently,
How old's the actress?
and she was played by a 16-year-old in
Okay.
seasons 1 and 2, and then in season 3 she was replaced. So Stephanie was actually played by two different actresses. So which one was the one for you, Matthew?
I didn't know that. So let's go with both. Let's go with both.
Sure. I mean, when you look on that show, like it is a bit sus. Like it's just a 16-year-old, 8-year-old, playing with puppets while a dude in the sky who's basically like an embarrassed gym teacher is just like in a
Yeah.
blimp,
Robbie
kicking about
Rottens
the
as a
town.
hero of that franchise.
Yeah, I mean, Sporticus probably deserves to die. Like we don't know what he's up to in that town.
Yeah, because they sort of in many episodes they do try and build a weird romance between Stephanie and Sporticus. I'm a big I'm not I was going to say I'm a big fan of that. I'm not a big fan of that, but I'm a big
Fucking
believer in
hell, man.
because like there's an episode where like he gets turned into like a Sporticus is
Into a
Stephanie's
child.
age, yeah,
Yeah,
and they sort of like are a bit
yeah.
flirtatious with one another, so it's a bit strange.
He needs some friends his own age. Like recently, I've been trying to connect to my childhood roots. So I've been watching a lot of iCarly, the
Love it.
classic Disney Channel show, and it's upsetting to watch in this day and age because there's a whole plot line revolving around a character called Neville, and he sort of writes a bad review of iCarly because Carly refuses to kiss him. So that comes off
Yeah,
horrifically
yeah,
post Time's Up, and also the creator of the show and like pretty much every other big Nickelodeon show were it was revealed that he had like pictures of the young cast, like pictures of their feet, and their feet are heavily featured in the episodes, so it's kind of distressing to watch these
yeah,
days.
yeah. I know, I can see why,
And
but yeah,
every adult character behaves in a suspicious way.
really, oh man, like
Yeah.
it sort of makes you consider like consider I think if we went back and rewatched like a lot of our favorite shows from our childhood, we'd probably like them less. I would say, Spider-Man the animated series is probably timeless, but as we've sort of mentioned, like it's not even the same for us now, is it? Like the line delivery, it's lacking in many instances as well, and even Batman the animated series, I suppose it's not doesn't.
Yeah, I would say, like we can't capture the same magic, but also, yes, some are drastically different just due to cultural, portrayals.
Yeah,
And, it is sometimes difficult to go back to things. I guess that's why they say never go back, just
yeah.
look on things in the past fondly instead of, dredging them up in the present and having them ruined for you.
A great point, Callum. And it's sort of an issue, I suppose, with some of these Disney films about like certain stereotypes are present, especially in Dumbo. I mean, we'll get into it there and stuff with the crows and more. So, like, I don't know. Do you think it's an interesting question? Like, I've seen a lot of people debate whether it's fair to criticize films on their like stereotypes and how they did things back in the 1940s by our modern standards. Like, where do you sit in that? Because it's a really interesting one. Like, I don't know, can we be more critical on them? But or is that fair because we're doing it from like nearly 80 years later? Like, how do you feel about it?
I think sort of, like I mean, I don't want to sound like too wanky, like bringing up, something literary, but
Go for it, man. Go for
when
it.
we studied the Tempest for GCSE English,
Yeah.
we talked a lot about how it's a bad thing to do to go to a different culture, and you foist your your societal views on their perception of society.
Mm.
So I think to do that is immoral. But I think it's fair to go back in time to our society, because
Yeah.
the rules and the morals and the conscience of our society should be the same, throughout all the time. So
Yeah.
to look back, and see our society, but in the past, yeah, I think that we have the right to judge
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's a
And
great point,
sort
man.
of like Dumbo, for example, was sort of prefaced on Disney Plus by saying, it may have some scenes, of like outdated cultural representation. And I'm just thinking, like, it's not outdated. If it was racist then, it's racist now, and vice versa.
Exactly. Yeah. Great point, man. It's a really good point.
Things that are racist now weren't not racist in the past. People just did it casually. Like, that doesn't make it okay. So
It's a
I
great
mean, to
point.
say it's outdated, I think's ridiculous.
That's a really great point, Callum. I agree completely, and it's really interesting. Like I think we could definitely see a future in a couple of years' time where movies like Dumbo were removed from certain streaming sites. I mean, we've seen it with Gone with the Wind with HBO. It's been removed and then put back on with like a disclaimer at the start, like similar to what Disney Plus have done with Dumbo. So I don't know how it's going to be. Like it's interesting because like films like Django Unchained by Tarantino, like it has racist themes, but it doesn't like I think it does it to critique them in the sense like it's a
Yeah,
film about racism and critiquing racism. And I know I've went slightly off topic here, but like I think films like that probably won't get the same criticism because it's disapproving of racism. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, of course. And I do, in some sense, prefer that, they keep the uncensored version up rather than, set like, taking the movie and removing scenes and then putting it back up, because then they're sort of, you know, you can't remove racism from history because we have to learn from it. So to sort of, take it back, that's impossible. You just have to move forward and do better.
Yeah,
You
it's a great
you
point.
can't reach into the past and change things. So, I would still rather, be able to watch this and critique it as it was made and say, for the time, this was racist or this was inappropriate. I would rather do that than, watch the sanitized version and be like, oh wow, they've backtracked because they don't want to be associated with racism.
It's a great point.
It would seem like it would seem ingenuine, and sort of like they can't take the criticism that they deserve.
It's a great point, buddy. And by having sort of Dumbo, the synopsis for that preface that it has racial stereotypes of the time, it sort of seems like in some people's eyes, I suppose some people could say it feels like it's acknowledging the racist themes, but it's almost worse that they're acknowledging it, but still saying, oh, we'll still have it on the platform, but we'll just by putting a disclaimer, perhaps Disney feel like, oh, we've done our part. Like we're not going to take it off because it's an important part of our lore. We should have it on, but then have the disclaimer there. But I don't know. It's a really difficult one because I can sort of see both sides. I can see why Disney would want to have it there because it's a part of their history. But likewise, I can see why people would want it removed because it feels like Disney is acknowledging the racism but doing nothing about it.
Yeah, because there's the balance of they may have it on there to not hide from it and to say, yeah, this was a bad thing. We want you to watch it and have your opinions
Yeah.
about it. But also, it's on a streaming service where they're making money from you
Yeah.
having watched
Exactly.
it.
Exactly.
So there are positives and negatives, and I don't think there's a right answer.
Yeah.
Just for everyone to just do better in the future
Absolutely.
is the real intention.
Absolutely, buddy. That was a great discussion. That was a really interesting one. Should I go back to Snow White?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Let's go back to Snow White. Uh, so we've talked a lot in person. I don't know about on the podcast, but about sort of the. I'm certainly a skeptic of love at first sight. I don't know about you. We've talked about this with the Tempest and Romeo and Juliet, and certainly a lot of literary works, and we see it sometimes in older films. We had it in The Graduate. That kind of you go on one date and you fall in love, but even in this kind of situation where you just see someone and you decide that they're the one for you, how did you feel that came across in this film, especially because you said, that you didn't feel the prince was in it enough?
It's a really interesting point, Callum, because I think the film portrays it in a really innocent manner, and I really enjoyed that. And you know, it's an interesting one as to whether love at first sight does exist or not. I think it's the sort of thing, like, I don't know if love at first sight exists, but from my perspective, I think if you know, I think when you meet the one, you'll know. I don't know if that's a similar, I don't know if that's the same as love at first sight, but I think if you meet someone and you'll know if they're the one, basically. But I thought it was really innocent enough in this film, and I would have liked to see the prince get more screen time. But uh, no, I was glad because it is the classic like prince and princess fall in love happily ever after. But likewise, the film doesn't exactly have a happy-ish ending. The film does present the consequences of the queen's actions. Snow White's asleep for a year, and I respect the movie for showing us the consequences of the queen's wrath. Like, it doesn't just wrap it up in a nice little bow where the dwarves chase the queen to her death. Yes, that does happen, but the queen still has success for like a year, which I think I respected it. That
Yeah, definitely. So sort of on love at first sight, I believe it does exist, but I believe to, sort of portray it as happening in every
yeah,
Disney film normalizes it and says this is the way to fall in love. And I sort of think, to sort of give that message to children can
yeah,
sometimes be a bit problematic because, they might, get false expectations about what's going to happen when they become an
great point.
adult, and then, be disappointed and think that something's wrong because they didn't meet the standards of this film. Obviously, that's probably looking a little too deep into this, as we often do. We go for the deep analysis, and
We
sometimes
do.
sometimes I drill too deep, beyond reason. But
It's an
that's just
interesting debate.
sort of how I feel.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
It's an interesting debate because, like,
Um.
I was listening. Sorry,
Yeah.
man. Go ahead.
Oh, I wasn't saying anything.
Oh no, because I was sort of I had watched a video about, like, it was a Kanye West documentary. True Jordy had did a Kanye West documentary, right? And he had sort of mentioned, Kanye had mentioned in an interview how, like, he saw Kim Kardashian on TV and it was like love at first sight for him. He saw her on the TV, was like, that's the girl I'm gonna marry. So it does happen, I suppose, in the modern sense as well. Like, I think that's a very sweet story. Like, I don't know a lot about Kanye West or Kim Kardashian, but from my perspective, they seem like a really good couple and stuff. So I thought it was a very sort of it was a very nice story for Kanye to tell, because it shows it does happen in real life and it's not just a fairy tale that sort of a lot of people consider Disney films to be.
Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah. Uh, just moving on from that,
Yeah,
I was very surprised and appreciative of the fact that it's well established that Love's first kiss can revive Snow White, and it wasn't just used as a Deus Ex
yeah,
Machina to get her out of
absolutely.
the sleep. I also assumed that it was, or at least it was, sort of popularized in media, that it was not first, Love's first kiss, it was true Love's kiss.
Hmm.
But for it to be Love's first kiss, that also sort of adds realism to this, because it doesn't have to mean that this was her one true love or this was the one. The one didn't have to find her and kiss her. It was just someone that she loved. So it didn't have to be the one for her
Yeah,
that
it's a
she
great
would have
point.
had to have coincidentally meant. I mean, how old do you think Snow White is? Like, because I feel like I feel like they seem like they're in their 20s, and then when you read like the fairy tales or you read the books associated with these, it's like 14-year-old Snow
Yeah,
White,
yeah,
blah
yeah,
blah
yeah.
blah.
Yeah.
Like they're usually shockingly young. So
I,
I would probably picture it like 16 to 18.
I was going like a 17 or 18 bracket. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like the prince is probably like 47. Because
Yeah. He
that's
loves
usually
Kiss.
how
Yeah.
the ages are divvied up.
Yeah, it's interesting because we can see, like, and I always bring it back to Shrek, but the Shrek films, like,
Yep.
do borrow. It's clear that they do borrow a lot from these sort of films, especially Snow White with like Love's Kiss and stuff. And it's interesting how they've sort of, what you said in this film, it's first Love's Kiss, whereas the Shrek films they've molded it to true Love's Kiss, and I think that's interesting because they are two very different concepts. Like you've said, like, it doesn't have to be the true love who rescues Snow White. So I think that's a really interesting concept, buddy. I hadn't actually considered that.
Yeah. So Matthew, I consider you, the most considerate person I've met, the most
Oh,
trusting person I've met.
thank you.
If someone that has magic is trying to kill you, are you accepting an apple from a withered hag?
No, probably not. Even if it's a
Correct
good, even if
answer.
it's a good looking apple, it does look tasty, but I probably wouldn't eat it.
it also looked madly suspicious when she just has a basket of green apples and then hands you the bright
Yeah.
red one.
You know what
You
it is,
know,
man?
well, like you know that a woman with magic is trying to kill you,
Yeah.
and all the dwarves have told you not to invite strangers in.
Yeah, I know. And there's a, I don't know if this was intentionally funny, but there's a bit where like Snow White's baking, and then she looks up at the window, and the old hag is just like staring at her like this through the window. I thought it was really quite funny.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of unintentional humor here, which at the time I suppose was used to frighten children, which I presume it would have if we were children watching this.
Mhm.
Because I think that this film holds up in probably every regard. I would happily show this to a child of the modern era and expect them to enjoy it. I think there's tons to be enjoyed here by every generation. Uh,
Absolutely.
and I know you said like you're a huge fan of death. Real life and in film. You love to hear a good murder story. You love to see a
Absolutely.
good violent murder in films. So I presume you love this one.
I thought it was quite funny. Yeah. And you know
It's
what it is?
hilarious.
I kind of wanted to ask you about this. You know, I don't want to. I don't want to get too like into English literature, but in English, we're taught about like pathetic fallacy and stuff like that about like the weather. And do you think like the way the
Sure.
weather changes in this film is a bit on the nose? Like we see like when Snow White eats the apple, there's a thunderstorm that comes in. When the Queen dies, it's a thunderstorm. But then when Snow White gets kissed, it's blue skies and stuff. I think that's on the nose. I think it adds to the film because I personally think it is so on the nose, but it kind of works for me because it is so obvious.
Yeah, I think it definitely works thematically, especially because it's established that this is, a universe of, magical creatures and magic. So, I mean, it's entirely possible that, the weather just localized to that area reflects, the general mood of the population. That's very possible. As you said, the universe isn't really that fleshed out, explicitly. So, I mean, we can sort of make our
Yeah,
own
yeah, quite
decisions about
funny.
how the universe works. And I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I'd like to sort of, just work based on the general vibe.
Yeah, no, I get you, man. I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, so at the end of the film, the hero of the film, quote unquote, Prince Charming, this whole film would unravel if he didn't have the delightful thought, doesn't that corpse look hot? Because
Yeah,
as you said, it's been a long ass time. This woman, we know for a fact that she isn't dead, but from what he knows, this is a 1 year dead old corpse, and
yeah.
he's like,
Oh,
looks
yeah,
good.
yeah,
And he goes in for the smooch, and like clearly it wasn't because he was aware of the fact that that would help
yeah.
in any way,
I
because they're
know.
all astounded that she wakes up. So let's just thank him for being a fucking creep, because
He
that's how
saved the
true love
day.
won the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, I know. And you know what it is, man? I have never seen a movie with like such a rushed ending. We've talked about the pacing for the first 10 minutes is so quick, snap, 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 and we loved it. And then for the next like 50 minutes, nothing happens. And then like for the last 15 minutes, or basically, well, 10 minutes even, Snow White eats the apple, the queen dies, Snow White's in a basically like a coma for a year, the prince kisses her, happy ending, and they walk off to the kingdom together. But I just thought that was so rushed, and it probably works in the sense that it wraps everything up in a nice little bow by the end. But I don't know, man. It felt a slightly bit rushed to me.
Yeah, I would say every single iconic element of this story, as you listed, the queen gets jealous, sends out the huntsman, Snow White finds the dwarves, she falls under asleep, queen dies, Snow White's woken up. All of those six huge plot elements of the film, that they're encompassed in probably half an hour of a nearly 90-minute film, and the
Yeah,
rest is just the dwarves doing dwarf shit.
yeah, yeah,
Like washing themselves, in the mines, being horny for Snow White.
yeah.
That's a solid like 50 minutes to the film, which I didn't really have a problem with. It's just it was really unexpected because, as I said, and as I know you haven't seen the film, so I assume it wasn't really what you were expecting, was it?
No, man, and you know what it is? Like, in terms of animation, even like I had heard a lot of people say, uh, oh, you'll never enjoy, the Snow White films or the early Disney films because you'll always compare them to like the modern Disney and Pixar era. But for me, like I'm a big fan of hand-drawn animation. I think the animation is absolutely amazing. Like I think even for 1937 or wherever, it's way ahead of its time. Like I
Yeah,
think it's fantastic. really good.
It's stunning. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. And we've mentioned Snow
absolutely.
White, but it's Snow White's maybe not great, but even still, like I think the movie's it nails even with the animals. Like the animals are so cute and stuff, and I think that the film nails it. Great visuals.
Yeah, 100%. And we'll definitely talk about even more stellar animation as we go on, especially with Fantasia. Probably. I don't know how much of that film you were paying attention to, but we'll get onto it.
Yeah, absolutely,
Uh,
absolutely.
did you have anything further on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs?
I didn't. Nobody did you?
Nothing more from me, so I'd love to hear your rating of the film, Matthew.
So, Callum, I don't know. I had a good time with this. You know, not a lot happens for me, and I think that the middle bit it's quite poor for me. I didn't care much for it, but the opening and the ending pretty good. So, and for how it defined the genre and a lot of the great points you made, I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10. What would you give it, buddy?
Great. So yeah, encompassing the cultural importance, as you said, quality of the animation, the music, the storytelling, is slightly, brought down by the pacing of the film. Because I feel like with a good edit, this film could go down to 50 minutes, and it would be
Absolutely.
vastly more enjoyable. So yeah, encompassing all of that, I would say that the balance of quality and my enjoyment are very similar. So yeah, I'd probably give it a 7.5.
Yeah, and I suppose if we're going for like balance of quality and enjoyment, like for me, I would say quality, it's up there with like an 8.5, but for enjoyment, it's probably at like a 6, so it sort of balances out like a 7, maybe 7.5 for me. What would you give
Yeah,
it in
yeah.
terms of like quality and enjoyment?
Yeah, I'd say quality 8.5, enjoyment 7. So I feel like a
That's
seven
great.
and a half,
Yeah,
so solidly in the middle.
yeah,
And
no.
I feel like that this will probably be the best reviewed film of the day.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, you know what? Well, I do quite like Dumbo, but we'll get into it. We'll get into it. We'll get into it. So, Callum, did you want to move on to our second film of the day then? Yeah.
Yes. So our second film for today is Pinocchio, a film which I was actually excited to see because I assumed that I would enjoy it. Because the vague concept I think is really intriguing, and I would say the first 2/3 of it are pretty exceptional, and then a huge falter at the end.
Okay.
What were your overall thoughts on the film?
For me, I thought my sort of thoughts was the opposite. Strangely, I really enjoyed like the underwater sort of whale involvement. I really enjoyed that part of the film. But for me, I think sort of similar to Snow White, it sort of gets bogged down for me in the middle. But I think in terms of like and we sort of mentioned this briefly in like Snow White. I just love how animal focused these early Disney iterations are. Like, I mean, we'll talk about it even with Dumbo, like the lead character, it is elf an animal. But here we see Jiminy Cricket, which I actually didn't know is where that character came from. I had always heard the name Jiminy Cricket, but I wasn't aware that this is the film that he appeared in.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but no, this film's iconic in itself, isn't it? There's been plenty of nods to Pinocchio and appearances of Pinocchio and other sort of other films, Shrek included. So it's a very iconic character, and it's good to
Well,
check
I
it off the
mean,
bucket
we
list.
like we will soon get round to Shrek. Once we've done Disney films and the accompanying Disney Tunes videos, we'll definitely jump into DreamWorks animation. So Matthew
Absolutely,
can clearly live his dream and talk about Shrek for an entire episode.
absolutely. Can't wait.
Yes. So the first character that we're introduced to in this film is Jiminy Cricket, as you mentioned, and this character is known throughout pop culture. His legacy is that he's the epitome of good. He's meant to be the conscience for not only for Pinocchio, but in a lot of pop culture. People refer to your cricket or your Jiminy Cricket. That is synonymous with conscience, and this film opens with him breaking and entering.
Yay!
Because why wouldn't it be? It's
Yeah,
obviously going to follow the themes of Snow White and show good people committing crimes,
yeah,
being
yeah.
cruel.
The role model all kids strive to be. You know what it is? Like
100%.
the entire I think for me more happens in the opening 5 minutes of this film than the entire Snow White film. And like to be fair, like I think this film does have like it's a lot. The animation is stellar. I think it's probably even better than Snow White in terms of it's so vibrant and stuff, and even the score is pretty great. But like Geppetto, why does he need so many clocks?
I assume he sells his pieces and just he's wildly unsuccessful. He's the Van Gogh of woodwork.
Yeah,
Where he's not appreciated in his time. So I assume he just makes them in bulk and desperately hopes that people buy them eventually.
yeah.
I mean, what I would criticize is the fact that he refers to Pinocchio as a puppet. He's clearly a marionette, and he says that, oh, all you need is some more pain, and I was like, what about a fucking working mouth, mate? Like, do you know what a puppet is?
Yeah,
Because if he's such a talented woodworker, he's meant to be the best woodworker there's ever been. You can add a mouth, mate.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think Pinocchio's design is pretty cool. I suppose there's always the classic. I mean, the thing I think everyone recalls about Pinocchio and the character is like when he lies, his nose gets longer, and I think that's a really interesting concept. But what surprised me in the film, it happens like once, I think, that I
It
can
happens
recall.
once,
It's not
yes.
a massive part of the film, and I'm amazed how like iconic that has become.
Yeah, it's always shocking to see going back to like really old films and watching the origin of like so many famous sayings and cultural concepts, and then seeing like how unimportant they are in the film.
Yeah.
Because yeah, as you said, it happens in one scene, and I was like, is that it? They didn't even explicitly link that to his line. They just said, oh, your nose grew and you were lying. Like it I just don't understand how that has become such so culturally
Yeah.
iconic.
I know, man. Completely agree.
Yes, so we were quickly introduced to the character of Geppetto, as we mentioned. And one thing that I picked up is that Geppetto calls his fish his little water baby, and then tickles her.
Yeah.
And I wrote that no wonder he needs to not only buy and make his friends.
Yeah, yeah. And the film sort of builds up a really strange relationship between Geppetto and his pets. Like, it's clear him and his cat don't get on. He has a weird tickle relationship with his fish.
Oh, a weird sexual, like
Yeah,
Riverdale sexual tickle tension with his
yeah,
fish.
yeah. Like Riverdale season 4 style. Like it's weird, man. It's weird, and I, I get Pinocchio and Geppetto. They haven't had the years to develop a relationship, and he hasn't had years to install the morals he wants in his son. But Pinocchio, don't talk to strangers, kid. Especially giant talking foxes and cats. Don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he's just because I mean, it's not like he has the mind of a baby because he can speak full English.
Yeah.
The fairies clearly endowed him with some form of intelligence. He can speak fluent English. So yeah, I don't know why he doesn't have. I mean, obviously, he has a sense of morality because he has his accompanying
Yeah.
conscience in Jiminy Cricket. But yeah, he doesn't seem to have any wits about him.
To be fair to him, like I'll forgive him the first time because like not there is a stereotype like all strangers are bad and like stranger danger, which isn't necessarily true. But
Yeah,
doesn't he fall for them again? Doesn't he
yeah.
afterwards?
Because I mean, a stranger is a friend you don't know yet,
Yeah.
unless they're a full-grown adult, and then you should probably only see them with parental supervision.
Yeah,
But yes,
absolutely.
they dick him over once. They basically get him abducted into slavery, and then they get him abducted into slavery a second time, and
Yeah.
he still doesn't catch on. Like they never get their comeuppance. They like see the third act is completely disconnected to the first two thirds.
That's a good point,
What the
actually.
third
Yeah.
act should really be is that them getting their comeuppance, the two villains, and
Sure.
then Geppetto and Pinocchio and Jiminy saving the Donkey Boys on Pleasure Island or whatever weird sex cult it's called.
Yeah.
That's what the third act should be, not them escaping from a whale. Like it has zero connection to the first two thirds of the film.
That's actually a really good point, buddy. And it's a sort of similar thing that I forgot to mention in our Snow White segment. How do you feel about these sort of early Disney films about how they treat sort of the villains and stuff? Because it feels like there's no real justice in these films for the bad characters. Yeah, the Queen in Snow White falls to her death, but for me, there's no real sense of justice there. And in this film, there's no real sense of justice for like the clear, obvious, weird slave trade at Pleasure Island, where the kids are turning into donkeys for goodness sake. Like it seems real, and there's a lot of dark themes in this film, like a lot of dark themes. And I don't know, it just doesn't feel like there's any justice or comeuppance, as you said perfectly, buddy.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't feel that there's any justice, and I think that they just wanted to make a simple kids film, so they're
Yeah,
like, oh, what's simple? Either kill them or just not acknowledge it. So I
Yeah,
guess these are the two examples of doing that, and
yeah,
I guess they continued that through some of their filmography, but eventually, clearly, they wised up a bit and found some creative solutions,
absolutely.
which I'm glad, and I'm looking forward to getting to some of the
Absolutely.
better of Disney's filmography, quite honestly. So
Absolutely.
the real question is the Blue Fairy, a fairy, or is she a demon? Because really, she's given him life, but she's also clearly cursed him. No other person ever has to prove their value to earn their life. A
Yeah.
child shouldn't have to worry that if he doesn't behave perfectly, he'll cease to exist.
It's kind of like a Ned from Groundhog Day scenario, isn't it?
Yeah, and like she's sort of seen as this, benevolent creature, who bestows kindness and grants wishes. But I mean, Geppetto's wish was for Pinocchio to be a real boy, and she's like, "No, you're going to be an alive puppet until you prove that you've earned it." And I'm like,
Yes. Sold into
that's not a
slavery.
wish, that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's a punishment. It's a curse, and it made me really sad to see. And I mean, I'm glad that in the end he gets to become a real boy. But I mean, I've never had to prove that I'm worthy to be a human,
Yeah.
and
Fair
I
point.
don't think
Yeah.
Pinocchio deserved that either.
Yeah, man. And like, there's a lot of like dodgy characters in this. I think is it Stromboli? Is that Stromboli? Stromboli?
Yeah, yeah.
Like
The circus owner.
he's a dodgy dude for a kids film. This film has this film has a lot of dark stuff. Like, isn't there like smoking and gambling as well in this film, which is very dark. Yeah, I don't think you could get away with that in a kids film nowadays, to be fair. But I don't know, like there's a lot of like the whole like Stromboli locking Pinocchio up in a cage and stuff and kidnapping him. That's pretty dark. And yeah, I don't know, man. Part of me likes it. Part of me, it feels like it feels a little strange. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, at least they call it out as immoral behavior. Jiminy Cricket's always there to critique it. But one thing that he critiques kind of bafflingly is like he seems to think that being an actor is inherently immoral. But like he really should have just stuck around to see that it was actually just like a kidnapping ring basically.
Yeah.
Because he was like, acting that's for immoral people. It's like that's not true. The slavery, sure.
Yeah, 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 exactly, exactly. And you know what it is, man? Like when Pinocchio sort of sold into well before he sort of sold into slavery, and he's singing in front of he's singing in front of everyone. I think it's like No Strings on Me. It kind of reminded me of like, do you remember how Age of Ultron sort of portrayed Ultron as like a Pinocchio type figure? Like I forgot the whole
Yeah.
segment of that film. I thought that was really weird. It kind of reminded me of that. I was like, I can see where Marvel were trying to go with that, and I think it's a clever idea. But I don't know. It was weird to me. It sort of brought me back to a time with the marketing of Age of Ultron.
Yeah, where they actually have him singing, and I
Yeah,
thought that they were going to be a bit more subtle in that film. But they actually show him like search the internet for cultural references, and then you see the Pinocchio clip like
yeah,
in his hardware or software, whatever. Whichever. I'm not a
yeah,
tech guy, but yeah, I thought it was quite explicit in that film that they were doing an obvious parody, and it seemed a bit self-congratulatory,
yeah.
like Disney, like how
Yeah,
sick are
I
we?
know. And that's another thing. I forgot they were the same studio. And also, like, there's supposed to be a really badass, threatening line at the end of like the first trailer where Ultron's like, "There are no strings on me." But then when you watch this film, it's a pretty like cheerful line, so it kind of makes it's kind
Yeah.
of like redundant in that film.
Yeah, I guess because like what they're both about liberation from their
Yeah.
limitations, but then one what once let off the leash is insane.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It is an interesting concept, like you said, about like Pinocchio wanting to be a real boy. I think that's an interesting concept, like you mentioned earlier in the podcast. And I don't know, I don't know if it was executed to what Disney wanted, to their standards. I don't know.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, about the scene with him lying, I don't really understand why he felt the need to lie at all because he was asked, why did you not go to school? He didn't do anything wrong. He was just manipulated as this naive
Yeah,
child that has only been alive for one day. I mean,
yeah,
what
exactly,
do you expect?
exactly.
So I mean, he easily could have just said, oh, I chose not to go to school. There's nothing immoral in that.
Yeah,
He just went with his instincts.
yeah. And you know what it is, man? I completely agree with you. And just before that scene, when like Stromboli is giving like Pinocchio money for like his performance, it kind of reminded me of Peter Parker and Raimi's the original Spider-Man. And like the way Stromboli is like, you know, the way he's eating with like a sword or like some sort of really long, elongated knife. I was like,
Sure.
he's definitely gonna like cut his mouth off when he's eating that.
But Matthew, you mentioned that sort of like, I get. Do you mean like sort of after the wrestling when he's like
Yeah,
giving
exactly.
the
Yeah.
money, but it's not enough? So what did you really just want to see then someone go and kill Geppetto? Was that your hope for the film? And then
Yes, exactly.
Pinocchio's like, it's all my fault.
Yeah. Oh man, I saw a hilarious meme. I think I've mentioned this to you before, but like it was a really funny meme. Like in Spider-Man 2 when Aunt May like gives Peter $20.
Yeah,
Yeah, I saw I saw a funny meme where like Peter responds with like the ad said 3,000. And I thought that was
I love that so
absolutely
much.
brilliant. But yeah,
I
back to
feel I feel
Pinocchio.
like us I feel like us doing like only one episode in the Raimi trilogy like wasn't paying enough respect to it. But like, there's nothing more to say. I guess we could do an episode where we like pitch our sequels to it. I guess
Yeah, that'd be
that
fun.
that could
Actually,
be
that'd be
fun.
really good. Yeah, yeah, that'll be fun. Like, especially because those films. They're a few of the only films where I wish I could like erase my memory of them just to watch them with you again for like the first time, because I think that would be absolutely hilarious.
Do you think that you would still enjoy them if you did that?
Ooh, I don't know. I'd say I'd definitely still enjoy them, but I don't know if I'd have. Well, I wouldn't have the nostalgia for them, of course, but I probably wouldn't enjoy them as much. What about you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you erase my memory of that, then I probably would just hate the superhero genre completely. And if I watched those with my memory of them erased from my childhood, I would probably find them incredibly tedious and cheesy
Yeah,
and bad.
yeah,
Yeah, I probably wouldn't participate in that exercise just because I feel like it did shape my film taste. But as we've sort of discussed, I don't know if we've discussed it on the podcast, but looking back on superhero films, they do kind of seem very one-dimensional and sort of lacking in substance, and that's why
yeah. We
our
have,
our
yeah,
reviews are usually very brief because there are no moral questions to be asked.
yeah.
There's no
Exactly,
substance.
man.
I
Exactly.
would say some DC films come close to that, but Marvel films are really just good to look at, funny. That they're a fun, dumb time for the most part, but
Yeah.
they do lack substance.
Completely, Callum. I think you're right, and it's that's sort of reflected in our podcast run times for superhero
Yeah,
movies and
definitely.
non-superhero movies. We've talked for hours about you know well we've talked about
But
our
like three romantic comedies,
really romantic comedies, and then like we it sort of made I don't know if it's made me dislike superhero movies more because that's sort of not what it is, but it sort of made me acknowledge the fact that they're maybe not as good or as culturally significant as I thought they were. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, they're not bad quality. They just lack substance. We'll just recognize them for what they are, but it's not
Exactly.
that what they are is bad.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, buddy. That's a really, really great way of putting it. Um, like,
Yes.
yeah, go ahead.
So
Back to Pinocchio, yeah.
yeah. Oh no, I was going back to Pinocchio. If
Go
you were
for
going
it,
to
man.
say something
No,
different.
no, no, I was going back to Pinocchio. Go for it, buddy. Go for it.
Okay, so we talk a lot about funny deaths on the podcast, but what I found more funny was sort of the creature horror of fucking what's his name, Lampwick, is that his name? Sure.
I think so.
Like him turning into a donkey.
Yeah.
Because I, I don't know how. Like, I'm very familiar with the plot of the first third of this film, and then the second two-thirds just baffled me completely because I haven't heard anything about any of this.
The
Like,
different
people
film
turning
almost,
into
isn't it?
donkeys. I was like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah. Yeah, like the first third of the film feels like a totally different film from the next two thirds to me. And like I had seen in like the occasional Disney montage of like Pinocchio turning into a donkey, but I didn't know. I totally forgot about that, and I didn't know how it was going to fit into this movie. But to be fair, there are some quite comical moments of when they turn into the donkey, and then like they let out a really large like donkey noise. I don't know how to describe it, but I don't know. That is a comedic element, I suppose, for the film.
Yeah, and another comedic part of the film that is obviously unintentional because they meant it fully seriously. I did think they were genuinely taking the piss when they said that Geppetto had been eaten by a whale
Yeah.
because like it just goes beyond like all logic of like what the last third of this film should be,
Yeah.
because I think it's simultaneously dull and weird, but it's weird in a completely uninteresting way. There's nothing fun about it. I just find it like, if I find it bafflingly weird, not funny weird,
I get
and
you.
then incredibly dull.
I get.
I don't know how you felt.
I think it's because it's so bizarre. I think that's why I like it so much. I thought the underwater scenes, to be fair, were animated really well, and like there are some really unintentionally hilarious scenes. Pinocchio and Geppetto are hugging it out inside the wheel while there's like 25 suffocating fish all around them. like like it just threw them into the water. Like I felt completely bad for the fish, just like flopping about there. Like you gotta feel bad for them.
I mean, if they're successful in getting their ship out of there, they're like, "Phew, dinner for weeks, you know. Like
Yeah,
they
yeah,
seem like quite
exactly.
selfish characters, you know. Yeah. Really, the Blue Fairy shouldn't have given. They shouldn't have let Pinocchio be a real boy. She describes him as unselfish. He let those fish die. You piece of
Exactly,
shit.
bastard.
But also, the Blue Fairy's criteria of what makes a real boy is ridiculous. Because I mean, technically, Pinocchio is a baby because he's been alive for what, 2 days. Also, her magic made his personality. So anything immoral
Her
he
fault.
does is her fault.
Yeah,
She
absolutely.
she's given him a conscience, sure, but she's also imbued him with a personality, intelligence, and a certain level of life experience before he was even able to be
Sure.
alive. But no, human child like should be judged for their behavior. You should judge their parents. There's the nurture versus nature
Yeah.
situation, but neither apply to Pinocchio because the nurture is from magic and the nature is from being fucking carved from wood. So I mean,
Exactly.
everything bad he does is
Her
the
fault.
fairy's fault, really. And is it really fair that to prove that he's worthy of human life, he had to drown? He had to die.
I know.
Like he had
I
to
know.
fully
I know.
drown.
Yeah. I would have respected the film way more if they just killed off Pinocchio. And I know that's me just say like obsessed with like kids dying, or not kids, not necessarily kids dying, but characters dying in films. But like having said that, the kid
Do you ever just cheer at a death in a film?
I'm a quite a happy person in general. I don't know why I keep wanting characters to die, but it's maybe because I like emotional scenes. But having said that, the kid
Yeah.
in me was glad that they revived him. But the magic blue fairy, wherever she's called, she kind of seems like the character. She just turns up whenever she wants without giving a fuck. She's just like, yeah, Pinocchio, you're a real boy. I'll revive you, but also, why'd you not go to school?
Um,
She kind of seemed like she was completely morally ambiguous.
yeah, she appears exactly as you said. She appears when she wants. She doesn't intervene when Geppetto's eaten by a whale. She doesn't stop Pinocchio from dying. She only resuscitates him from death.
Yeah,
She seems like a piece of shit, quite honestly.
she's barely in the film as well. It's sort of like a Prince Charming situation from Snow White. Like she's in it for like barely 5 minutes as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I really think that this is sort of like a make a deal with the devil situation, like in Groundhog Day, as we
Yeah.
said. I definitely think Geppetto's doing some work in hell, in
Oh
exchange for
yeah.
that boy.
Oh yeah. Did you have any other concluding points, bro?
I have nothing else. As I said, I felt that the third act was incredibly disjointed from the rest of the film, and it is bizarre that the villains don't get comeuppance, and the boys getting turned into donkeys don't get saved. I feel like the Blue Fairy easily could have been used to sort any of those situations, and I would have excused it. If they had established that magic exists in this universe, which they did, and then magic solved all the problems, I would be like, okay, that's a bit too neat, but fair enough. Because if you're going to introduce something in your film, finish the plot line. Don't just have the main character escape from that
Yeah,
situation and then leave it hanging.
absolutely, man. Absolutely. I think that was a great point, buddy. I'd love to hear your rating.
So again, I think we need to rate this on a level of enjoyment and
Completely.
quality. So as we said, incredibly groundbreaking for the genre, incredible animation, questionable character decisions, but this film, sometimes critiques that as immoral behavior. So that's perfectly fair. The Blue Fairy is a complete dick. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Uh, I didn't enjoy this as much as I thought I would. I thought I'd enjoyed the whole film. I would say I enjoyed two thirds of it. So I'd say for enjoyment, I'd give it a 6.5 because I enjoyed 2/3 of it. I enjoyed 2/3 of it completely, so I'll give it 6.5. But for quality, its influence on the time, its cultural impact, probably an 8 or an 8.5.
That was great, buddy. I was really a really great fan. I'm pretty much the same. For me, I can 100% understand why, and sort of sympathize with your point that you felt that the last third was sort of discombobulated from the rest of the film, and it was lacking therefore. But for me, it was so bizarre that I enjoyed it. It was my favorite act out of the three. So for me, I think for enjoyment, I would say 7. I would say for quality, probably an 8, 8.5, just because of its like cultural significance. It's probably one of the most iconic films of all time, especially animated kids films. So I think that was great, man. I thought you had some great points. Did you want to mention, or did you want to move on to our third film of the day? And this is probably it's pretty much our third and final film of the day, because Fantasia is such a departure from the first 3 films that we've talked about. But did you want to hop into Dumbo then? Yeah.
I believe Fantasia came before Dumbo.
Oh, did it? Okay, Fantasia it is. Let's do it. That was my mistake. My mistake on that one. But yeah.
I may be completely wrong,
No,
but
you're probably right, man. You're probably right.
we can find out in the edit.
We'll be covering both.
So yes,
We'll be covering both. So Fantasia.
yes. So I would say of the early Disney films, obviously, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was a pioneer for this type of animation quality, and it opened this huge popular filmography. But weirdly, I would say Fantasia, it's the one that always places high on the top 100 whatever films,
Yeah.
of cultural impact. I'd never seen this film. I know you hadn't either, and I probably don't know many people who have. But I would say for people of previous generations, this was a huge spectacle. It was an incredible marvel. So it's considered more groundbreaking than it's probably considered one of the most groundbreaking animated films of all time.
Wow.
And we probably have some poor things to say about it.
This is probably the weirdest film we've ever reviewed, in the sense that, as you said at the start of the podcast, it's sort of like an orchestra music video with like animation
Yeah,
over the music and sort of weird intervals with a conductor. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, it's so weird. I would say that like anthology segments or vignettes in films are just not for me. But yeah, this film is so unique and so bizarre. Like the intro and the intercut footage of live action sort of plays like a boring intro to a Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen it, but it's sort of like a guy looks directly into the camera and it is like, no, the footage that you will see now is horrifying and will chill you to the bone. And now
Yeah.
we enter the Twilight Zone. Like it
Yeah.
was like that, but it's like, and now you're gonna see some pretty good
Yeah,
animation
I
over
get you. No, I know
over
what you
some good
mean.
music, but you're not gonna enjoy this. Let's go.
Yeah, and you know what it is, man. Like, for me, I think this film is for a very specific audience, and I think Disney understands that. But like, this is not what I thought this film was about. I'll be honest. I thought this film was like going to be about, and Mickey Mouse is in this, but I thought this was
Yes,
going to be about like the tales of Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, Minnie Mouse, and stuff like that. I didn't.
100%. Yes.
Yeah, because Fantasia, you think Fantasia fantasy is going to be the exploring the universe of Mickey, Minnie, Donald Duck, all that good stuff. But no, it is very for a specific audience, and the weirdness of it kind of makes me like it, because there are some great animation scenes in here. I got to be honest, I was a big fan of some of them, not all of them, but some of them, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts on this, because to be fair to the film, it's really well shot and the lighting is really good.
Yeah. So as you sort of said about Mickey Mouse, the most popular, famous, iconic of the 8 anthology segments of this film is the Sorcerer's Apprentice. So that's pretty much all the iconic imagery that I've ever associated with it. So I thought that was the whole movie,
Yeah, me
and
too.
I thought that as the whole movie would probably be okay. And that's not the whole movie. That's 1/8 of the movie.
Yeah,
So I probably enjoyed 1/8 of the film.
yeah,
Uh,
completely.
which
I agree.
and we'll go on to talk about that further. But just to sort of talk about it in a conceptual manner, I think that setting images to music rather than setting music to images, which is what a normal film is incredibly interesting. But like, you can't call that a film, can
No,
you?
no, you can't. I don't think you can. And it's really interesting you mentioned that about like you thought it was going to be like a Mickey Mouse film, because I completely agree, and it's sort of it's the opening like Mickey Mouse sort of slapstick style humor with the magic broomsticks. It kind of reminded me of a Tom and Jerry sketch, and I love the old Tom and Jerry sketches. And I think if the whole film was like that, it would have worked better. But you know, it's interesting because I don't know when Tom and Jerry came out. I'd imagine it's probably after this film. I don't know, but yeah, like I don't know.
Yeah, I think Hanna-Barbera was sort of kicked off in the 60s, I believe.
Yeah, man, and that's interesting because, like you said, there is a big difference, isn't there, between setting music to images and images to music?
Yeah, huge. And I think, you know, to give it full credit, it is visually and musically incredible, and the
Absolutely.
animation is paired well with the images. Uh, Sorry, the animation is paired well with the music.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think there'll be a lot of us just going like, yeah, though,
Yeah.
not for
There's not a
us.
lot to say, is there, man? Really? Because like
Not a huge amount, no.
there's a weird like orchestra setup that takes like 2 minutes of the film, and you know, to be fair, like the orchestra, there is really amazing like futuristic neon visuals, which I thought was great. And the conductor, I for some reason I thought the conductor was Walt Disney. I researched that it's definitely not Walt Disney, but I always thought that's what Walt Disney would look like. But no, like I thought he was really well. I thought he was fine. And to be fair, I don't really, can I call that a performance? Because he's not acting. That's him, isn't it?
Well, there's the host and then there's the conductor. Like the conductor, uh, I don't remember his name and I don't remember the name of the host, but they are two separate dudes. Like the host is definitely giving a performance because there's also a moment of like slapstick humor where someone like runs
Oh,
into like
yeah,
a like a set of wind chimes or something. Like
yeah,
it is
yeah,
clearly a staged performance, you know, intercut with the orchestral performances.
yeah,
Yeah, so those sort of, you know, the foray into live action parts of the film is they're bizarre.
yeah. They are bizarre. Isn't there like a weird dynamic between the host and Mickey Mouse as well? Because there is sort of like a sort of a live action crossover there, where like Mickey Mouse's shadow appears with the host shadow, which I thought was strange. So yeah, like one thing I was saying about Mickey Mouse, like for me, I think I saw like there was a weird crossover between like Mickey Mouse's shadow appears with the host shadow like on the background. So that was like a weird live action crossover for me. I don't know. You got
I,
that?
yeah, I mean, sort of, you know that I really despise silent films, and I would not have liked to live in this era where those were the only options available to me. So
Yeah.
sort of the you know the few moments where we do flash to the orchestra and the host and the you know the visual sense of the orchestra playing, that's probably the moments of the film that I enjoyed most. So even in that sort of weird, bizarre moment of like live action blending with animation, I really appreciated it just because there was
Yeah.
something interesting happening on screen that I could pay attention to. Like
Yeah.
I would say I was tuned out of about 60% of this film.
Oh, me too. Me too.
You know,
Yeah,
Matthew,
man.
be honest, did you watch all of it?
I will be honest. There were bits that I skipped out. I will be honest. There were bits that I skipped out. Uh, but
I mean, I understand.
and it wasn't a lot of it. Maybe it was like 7 to 10 minutes of it. And
Okay.
so it wasn't a lot of it. But for me, I actually thought the Mickey Mouse sort of with the magic broom, I thought that was actually really well done. You know, the broom's like accidentally drowning Mickey Mouse is quite funny, but then Mickey tries to like axe the brooms to death, which I thought was really brutal.
Yeah. I thought that came across like incredibly like Frankenstein, where you know
Did
he just
yeah,
decides to
man.
kill it because it doesn't you know suit his purposes anymore.
Yeah, yeah. I actually love to cover Frankenstein one day, all the Frankenstein movies or something, or the
Oh yeah,
creative
definitely.
one. But
Or mad scientists or
yeah, that'd
some
be fun.
vibe.
That'd be fun. Also, like you know, the Nutcracker theme in this film, I thought that was fantastic. It's so good, isn't it? It's really good.
Yeah, that music is incredible. But I would say the two instances of animation that I really appreciated most were, as you said, the Sorcerer's Apprentice with Mickey Mouse, and the final segment
Yeah.
with sort of the you know the demonic beasts.
Mhm.
I assume you probably enjoyed the extended dinosaur
I
sequence,
did, man. I have that in
probably.
my notes. Yeah, I thought the creation of the Earth segment with the dinosaurs was really well done. And you know, I'm a sucker for dinosaurs, so I was a big fan of that one. But So what was your favorite? The final one with like the demons and stuff? Do you like that?
I really appreciated that. Especially sort of, it reminded me a lot of it was either the 80s or 90s TV show Gargoyles, which is also on Disney Plus. It reminded me a lot visually of that. But I would say my favorite was probably The Sorcerer's Apprentice, because it was the closest it came to an actual narrative,
Yeah,
which
man.
even the host of the show recognizes. He says this is the only one with a definite story. But I would say the first two or three segments, which are basically just squiggles in the sky. It's very impressively animated, but there's just nothing to connect to.
Yeah.
There's no characters, there's no visuals. It's just very impressive, dull animation.
Yeah, it's sort of reminding me like if you're listening to an album or something on YouTube, there is still an image there, but it's of the album, so it's not really a video in the sense. Like YouTube would classify that as a video, but it's just audio with a plain image. It's kind of what our
Yeah.
podcast is in many ways. That's basically what our
Yes.
podcast is. So it's kind of like a musical podcast in a way, that whole scene. Yes, it's moving, but
Yeah.
it's just a bland image, although it is a very well animated image, I will say. It looks cool.
Yeah, but yeah, as you said, they sort of have the audacity to call this a film when it isn't. Like when you have a podcast or a piece of music, you can lie down, close your eyes. But, this is a film, and we're professional podcasters. We
Yeah,
had to
yeah.
tough it through this. We were expected to watch this with as much vigor as we could handle, and clearly it wasn't a lot, because I would say I was on my phone for, as I said, 60% of the time
Yeah.
probably. Uh, I glanced back, during my phone time, but I needed it, because this is an animated film, but as we said, obviously there's an equal balance between music and visuals, and sometimes the visuals are incredibly impressive, but they're just dull to look at. So sometimes I just went on my phone and really appreciated the music. So that
I
was sort of
respect that,
a
buddy.
nice experience.
I really respect that. And like you said, the final animation, I think it's called Night on Bald Mountain, I think, and it is fantastic. But the one just before that, it's like I think the host introduces it as like magical tales of unicorns and stuff like that, and it's sort of like a fantasy animation. And strangely enough, and I know a lot of these early Disney films, especially Snow White and Pinocchio, they are more fantasy orientated. But for me, it didn't feel like Disney at all. Like the animation was really strange. I thought even to a certain extent, the dinosaur sort of animation, it didn't necessarily feel like Disney to me. And maybe that's because Disney hasn't necessarily explored that a lot. But I don't know. It felt off to me, especially the fantasy element. I don't know if you got that.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it, but I suppose, yeah, the only really established part of the Disney brand at that point was probably, Mickey and his cast of additional characters. So I guess they were still finding their footing at this point.
Yeah.
So, I guess tonally that's excusable, but yeah, that's really interesting. I'm just gonna loudly turn my page.
No worries, buddy. No worries.
Also, like I mean, definitely cut this out, but like I staple my pages together. Sometimes I can't see the corners of the pages.
No worries. No,
But
I do that all the time, man.
fucking hell.
See, with my essays and stuff for English, I always used to do
Yeah.
that mistake.
Yes. So, uh, thankfully there's an intermission in the film, and I was really hoping that it was just a black screen for 15 minutes so that I could
Yeah.
skip through it and
Get
like
some
have
runtime
made
out of
some
the way.
progress. Yeah, because I feel like there were such long stretches. I would say I watched all of these films today, and this film is obviously only 2 hours long, but it probably took me 3.5 hours. I was thinking like, okay, if I suffer through this 20 minutes, I can give myself a 10-minute break, then get back to it. Go through this
Yeah,
next half
yeah.
an hour, and like that's just not what a film watching experience should
No,
be.
not at all, man.
I shouldn't feel subjected to it, and I felt bad like watching this. I was like, oh, I'm sad I made Matthew watch this for
Oh
this.
no, don't be silly, man. Honestly, like I think you've hit the nail on the head there, buddy. And like we sort of said, this is for a very specific audience, and I can definitely understand why someone who likes this sort of these sort of things would like this 100%. Like if you're someone who's into their classical music and like your early sort of 1940s animation, this is your film. This is probably your favorite film. But for us, because it's not really our favorite film, and it's our first time viewing, we don't have really that positive things to say about it. Although saying that, there are some good scenes in there. The Mickey Mouse animation we've mentioned was great, and there are some. I don't know if they're intentionally funny bits in this, but there's. Did you notice like the weirdly sexualized ostriches in this?
I think I tuned out at that point.
I respect it.
I mean, they open the show by saying, "Oh, we're gonna accompany our music, by images that you
Sure.
would conjure in your mind as you listen to it." And I'm like, "Nah, man, I don't think I'm conjuring sexy ostriches while I'm listening to classical music." You know,
Yeah, yeah.
I would say the Sorcerer's Apprentice and the did you say Night on Bald Hill or something?
That Night in Bald
Yeah,
Mountain, yeah. They make sense.
Night on Bald Mountain. Yeah, those make sense. That is the kind of imagery that they're trying to conjure. Yeah, but like there was one point where like crocodile like
Yeah,
anthropomorphized
crocodiles.
crocodiles are dancing. Is that where they're dancing with the sexy ostriches? Is that the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
part?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that wouldn't run through my mind.
Yeah, like
Oh,
it
it's
sort of
sexy
reminded.
hippos as well.
Yes, hippos. And the scene in like Captain America: The First Avenger where he's like dancing with all the classic, girls, like the 1940s girls who dance for like to promote Captain America.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me of that in a way. And I mean, they are very similar eras. I mean, the same era. So I guess maybe that was intentional to sort of harken back to the war because this was released during World War II, wasn't it? World War II was
Yes.
39 to 45. So
This was 1940.
so yeah, sort of right in the middle there. So that is interesting. That probably was intentional. So, but yeah, like I don't have a lot to say about it. And well, one thing I did want to ask you, right? This film sort of uh, in many ways, I can, like you said, it's very well regarded and it's probably a classic Disney film. And I wanted to ask you this: have you ever been to Disney World? And if not, would you want to? Like, would it entertain you? Like, would you like to go someday?
I have been to Disneyland Paris. I
Yeah,
wish that I had gone back. I wish that I could go back with knowledge of what I know now about Disney because back then I'd probably never seen many Disney films, so I probably didn't appreciate the characters and the links to the films.
mhm,
But I appreciated a good roller coaster. Well,
yeah,
I know you've been to Disneyland Florida, right?
yeah, man. And I don't
Disney
know what
World or whatever.
I don't know what the Paris one's like, but it does feel like its own country in a really weird way. Like there's a real sense of community in Disney World for me, and like it does feel it's a very special place. I don't know what the Paris one like. Would you say the Paris one like is it like a is there a lot of people from all over the world that go to the Paris one? Because I imagine the Paris one it's very easily accessible for people from Europe, so I'd imagine you get a lot of different diversity in there. What's it like? Is it cool? Do you like it?
Yeah, I think the cast is mostly comprised of English speakers, just to be uh, as appealing to tourists as possible, because
Yeah.
English speakers are probably going to be their biggest audience. But yeah, there are certainly visitors from all over the world, and yeah, as you said, it does feel like its own unique place, and then this sort of nook of like
Yeah.
part of the world that just feels bizarre.
It
Like
does, man. It
if you
does.
don't understand Disney at all, I'm sure it's impossible to understand.
Yeah, man. Like, do you remember? Have you ever went to Barry's in Portrush?
I have, yes.
I wish it was still open that we could have went down there one day because you and I have never had the experience of going to like an amusement park or any roller coasters together. So I'd love to do that one day with you if it
I
reopened.
know, especially Barry's, because like
Oh,
to
Barry's,
be
man.
fair, it closed a fair few years ago. It closed a few years ago, right? And
It
I,
did,
I
yeah.
haven't been in many years, but I absolutely kicked ass at those games. Like
Oh
I
man,
won a
they were
shit
so
ton of
good.
prizes.
They were so like.
They were so good.
Would you agree? Like it's a classic. It kind of reminds me of the theme park from the ending of Shazam. Like it's a retro theme park, isn't it? It's not really a theme park, but it's a retro amusement park, isn't it? Proper retro.
Yeah, yeah. It feels like that kind of situation in like Terminator 2, where
Yeah, yeah,
John Connor has to go to the arcade. That's the only place he has fun. And sort of back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, you'd go to the circus or you'd go to the arcade because there was literally fuck all else to do. You
yeah,
know, I like doing that as a child because I felt the same.
yeah.
When you're a child, you can basically only go to the places that your parents take you. So it's nice to have a unique and fun experience. At a place that's very family friendly.
Absolutely. I even miss going to the arcade with you, bro. Like, a lot of people think arcades are like dying breeds, but some of my best memories are at the arcade with you. Like that's a fun time at the Odyssey.
I know I very recently won my first game of pool ever
Good
because
man.
I am absolutely fucking dreadful at it.
Oh man, I
I
haven't
don't
played in
know whether
ages.
it's the I don't know whether it's that I'm terrible at it or that you're great at it.
No, I'm
I'm sure it's a
definitely. I
balance.
think some days, sometimes you just have an off day. Like I think if I went to play again, I'd be absolute dog shit. It's just one of those games,
Uh,
isn't it, where you can have a good day or a bad day, isn't it? It's never consistently good for me.
yeah, it takes a good warming up as well.
It
You know,
does,
like you can
man.
be
It does.
absolutely trash at the beginning and then demolish by the end.
It'd be a good like party night, wouldn't it? Like a games night, like drinks by a pool table and all that. That'd be fun.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like my two biggest aspirations for when I'm a homeowner is a garden and a game room.
Yeah. Oh man, I can imagine like a proper man cave as well.
Yeah, you know, like home cinema. You know, the
Dartboard,
walls are lined with DVDs, darts, pool table. You know,
movie posters.
absolutely. Oh, 100%.
Class, yeah. But have you any more points in Fantasia, buddy?
Nothing more from me. So, is there anything from you, or did you want to jump into ratings?
I'm happy to jump into ratings, buddy. I'm interested. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you give it out of 10 for entertainment and quality then? Because it's a hard film to rate for us, isn't it?
Yeah. So you know, as we've sort of made clear, I did not enjoy the film. I did not enjoy the watching experience. But technically, all this film is music and animation, and both of those are stellar. You know, it's some of the best animation I've ever seen, some of the best music I've ever seen. But combined, it's not a film. So to
Absolutely.
rate this on exactly what it is, everything in this film, as intended, is perfect. So technically, for quality, I have to give it a 10 out of 10. But for enjoyment, I guess probably a 1. I'm not going to give it a 0 because I did appreciate the music and the animation. I
Sure,
appreciated them
sure.
perfectly, and especially those two segments that we've given praise to. But I never want to feel subjected to watching a film. You know, feeling like I have to watch it by obligation,
Yeah.
which is exactly how I felt in this situation, more so than probably any other film. You know, I've never had to like take breaks because I just couldn't cope.
Yeah.
You know, like it's a bad sign. But I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Callum. 'Cause I agree with everything you've said. I think, we've talked about rewatchability factor for films, but this film, it has no rewatchability whatsoever. And that's not necessarily like a huge criticism because, like you've said, the animation and the music, it's sort of in a weird way, it's sort of like constructing a good meal. Too many cooks can spoil the broth in a sense, and you can have two good ingredients separately, but they might not work together. And that's sort of the relationship I have with this film. Like you said perfectly, the animation stellar, music stellar, together not good, not so good. So for me, I think quality, like you said, a 10. For me, enjoyment probably a 2 or a 3. So it's a really strange one to rate. I it's one of those films I don't think we'll ever see another film like this again, and for that, it is quite unique.
Well, there is a film called Fantasia 2000
Oh no!
uh,
Yes,
that,
I forgot
that we'll
about
be
that.
that we'll be watching in a few weeks.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know how it differs from this. I hope it's not exceptionally similar, because the Movie Mates channel may get deleted. You know, it's like if I'm just like I'm not doing this, like I might have to like rage quit.
Yeah, we're like
You know,
105 subscribers.
I
We're
don't want to go
happy.
through the
Yeah.
yeah. I don't want to go through this again. You know, so I just hope there's something redeeming because the music's incredible, the visuals are incredible, even put together, incredible. But it's not a film. It's a 2 hour long music video, and I never, even if I love the song and I love the music video, I don't want to watch it for 2 hours.
Yeah,
There's
man.
almost nothing I want to watch for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Most films being 2 hours is too long. So why are you doing it to this kind of film? You know, if this was
Yeah.
stripped back to the 2 or 3, I would say if this was stripped back to the demons, the dinosaurs, and the Sorcerer's Apprentice, and it
Pretty
was a
good.
quick 50 minutes or an hour, that's a solid film. I think that we'd have a good time. That's probably the length of like silent film that I could cope with. But two
Yeah.
hours was just an
I
ordeal.
agree. I agree. And you know what it is, man. Like sometimes, like after I watch a film, for example, her. Like after I watched her, like I would go on YouTube. Well, let's see what the reviewers have to say. Chris Stuckman, he posted a review for her. I like to listen to his thoughts after I've recorded with you and we've shared our thoughts together, just to see, do people think the same as us? For this film, it's such a niche film. Like I went to see the reviews for Fantasia, literally doesn't exist. It's such a niche film that like I don't know what, like maybe it's because it's just so 1940s. Like it's so for its time that it's sort of, in a weird sense, it's sort of exiled itself from a modern audience. So I don't know. It's such a straight. This is probably the weirdest film I've ever seen, but also I'm kind of glad I've seen it because it just, as you said, like
Yeah.
it widens your own filmography in a sense, and it's sort of it's another experience to add to the catalog. You know?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's considered one of the most influential films
Yeah.
of all time, but I
Yeah.
feel like no one has actually seen it. Like, I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of people are saying, "Oh yeah, great film, huge influence." I haven't seen it though. I mean,
Yeah.
at least we'll have one leg above those people by saying not very influential, saw it, didn't like
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Exactly, man. But listen, I had got the films mixed round the first time, but now I suppose we can move on to our fourth and final film of today, Dumbo.
Yes. Uh,
One thing I wanted to mention to you about this film right off the bat. Now, this film has been criticized a lot. We've mentioned about Disney Plus and the disclaimers it makes about the racial stereotypes, but one thing I kind of wanted to praise the film for was how it made me consider like the contemporary values of today regarding animal cruelty and stuff and animals in the circus, because like this sort of shit does go on still, like animals being abused in the circus. Like we see the videos of like the bears being chained up to dance, like that this the
yeah.
elephants in this, it is heartbreaking. Like how do you sort of feel about how this film displays it? Like do you think this film intentionally displays it as a bad thing, and if so, do you think the film intentionally displays it for us to criticize? Like, do you think this film displays it for us to consider years into the future?
Yeah, I don't know if the message was meant to have the longevity that it clearly has, and it's incredibly relevant right now with Tiger King. It
That's a
sort
great
of
point,
comes
man. That's a great
across,
point.
similar level of animal abuse. And yeah, I do think it's definitely meant to be a critical perspective on it because every situation that the circus owners put Dumbo in is a ridiculous
Yeah,
situation in a death-defying stunt. So I think it's definitely showing a negative view on the treatment of animals. So yeah, I definitely don't think it's praising that
yeah,
that.
great
I
point.
mean, it shows that the humans do love that. They get great enjoyment from it. But I mean, I suppose a consistency in Disney films is that sometimes the humans are the villains, and I
Yeah,
guess that is sort of a part of this film that the the sorry, I nearly said the churchgoers, the circus goers, laugh at Dumbo, and encourage him to do more and more dangerous stunts. And yeah, I think the film definitely wants us to look on that as condemnable.
that's such a great point. But in like you said, I kind of respect Disney for how it presents like the human characters to be the sinister ones for most of the time. Like we've seen that in the Tarzan films as well, with Clayton, and it's a sort of similar film to this, and how that he abuses animals, and how the humans abuse animals here in the circus. And it is a really interesting one because I think everyone deep down, or at least most people, have a certain love and appreciation for animals. I mean, that's why pets are so popular, I would imagine. So I'm like, I know like you don't have a pet right now, but I know you have had pets, and like, does it ever make you consider like, having a pet in the future as well? Because like, what? Well, that's a question. I know you want to have a dog in the future, but do you have any favorite animals? Because this film has so many animals in this one, so.
Yeah, I suppose I'd never thought about it, from the perspective of the preservation of animals, say in the jungle or the forest. That's not something that I often think about, but
Yeah.
I'm always saddened to see animals treated poorly in captivity
Yeah,
because that's not nature taking its course. That's humans intervening and causing unnecessary abuse and harm.
yeah,
And I suppose people would argue that us causing further damage to the environment with global warming, we're also negatively intervening, while, although inadvertently,
yeah.
we're also damaging the animal kingdom elsewhere
Mhm.
without us even, needing to abuse them intentionally. Uh, so yes, sometimes I'm guilty of, appreciating, domestic animals uh, more than wild animals or animals
Me too. Me too.
in the wild. So yeah, when I think, oh, what's a pet that I love? I would think of a dog, and that is the kind that I would want to own. So I
Yeah,
am sort of guilty of that.
I
But I
think
mean,
everyone is. I think
that is
everyone
in
is
some
one
way
point.
understandable.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
100%, man.
no one's going to be able to, like, no one has the capacity to care for an elephant properly in, in their yard.
Yeah, exactly, man. And you know what? Like I think we have talked about the moral implications of zoos and stuff before when we talked about Tiger King, haven't we?
We have, yes.
Yeah. So we'll I don't know if we don't have to get into it now because we've talked about it in our life during lockdown part one. But like it is an interesting one. I thought it was interesting because this film is, this film does deal with a lot of dark themes as well. Especially for a kids film. And I had saw a review of this, and they had sort of on the rear. I can't remember what his channel name was, but he had sort of mentioned how this was the first family oriented Disney film rather than a kids film. Do you agree with that? Because I sort of do in a way.
Yeah, I feel like it embraces families. It has certainly a deep theme about the importance of family with Dumbo treasuring his relationship with his mother.
Yeah.
But if we want to sort of leap into the narrative of the film,
Sure, man.
one thing that I sort of think that it points greatly at being a children's film is the sort of child's eye perspective of how the world works. And two big examples that I could link that to is sort of the trains being alive,
Yeah,
them sort
yeah,
of being personified like Thomas the Tank Engine,
yeah.
and also the idea that storks bring children, and also the land being labeled with as though
I
it's a
love
map,
that. Yeah, I love that.
Florida being labeled as Florida, and I thought that that made me think kids film.
It's a great point, man. Even the character design of Dumbo, for me, the cutest Disney character from of all time, and you know, it's so weird because the I've seen the I haven't seen it, but I've seen the animation for the way Disney do these live action films these days, and it's the live action Dumbo is terrifying to look at for me. I don't know. It's such a
Especially the clowned up version is quite horrifying.
quite alarming, yeah, quite disturbing. But I haven't seen that film, so I assume it's a very similar film to this one, if not exactly the same. But like I don't know, I thought I love the animation of the train crossing the map of America, like you said, with the map of Florida. I thought that was great, and it does point to it being a kids' film for sure. And to be fair, like there are some great tunes in here as well, really good ones. I really enjoy the circus workers. We work all day, we work all night. I thought that was a personal favorite of mine. But
Yeah, there's only there is an issue with that. However, that
oh yeah,
it's sort of portraying black slavery, and they say
yeah,
that basically they throw their money away. We don't know on what, but it may be alluding to prostitution or
yeah,
other modes of using your disposable income. But yeah, it was sort of a negative portrayal of the kind of people that would be responsible for say setting up a circus.
yeah. I thought it was a good tune. But when you look into the lyrics and stuff and the themes it presents, it's very outdated, isn't it, man?
Yeah, definitely.
I can
Yes.
imagine.
So yeah. So you mentioned earlier that talking animals are actually probably some of your favorite portrayals in Disney films, and I would say I hate them.
Fair, fair. There are some annoying talking animals in this film, granted, and I kind of like how Dumbo is like a non-speaking character. It's kind of refreshing.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I mean, even looking on Pixar films and upcoming
Oh yeah,
Disney films,
yeah,
usually the high points for me are the human-driven characters, the human character-driven films.
yeah,
Just because I feel like obviously that's going to be easier to empathize with, even when the animals are given a human-like personality. I just often find the disconnect too difficult
yeah.
to sort of
Yeah.
handle.
Especially with kids' films, Callum, like you do definitely have to have a certain relatability to the character, don't you? And I suppose that works better with a more human-like, or certainly a more anthropomorphized character, like the Monsters Inc. films. Like they're more human than Dumbo would be.
Yeah.
So you sort of feel like it's a reliability or a relatability thing for you. Yeah.
Yeah, because as you said, it's a kids' film, so you're given there's already the barrier of the character probably being quite one-dimensional because you don't have a lot of time to develop them,
Super
and
point.
then you're given the second barrier of they aren't even your species, so it is sort of a second hurdle to relatability, as you said.
Yeah, man. Yeah, completely. And we've talked about like the dark themes in this film, and one thing I thought was really, really good was how I felt so bad for Mrs. Jumbo when she is imprisoned and sort of separated from her child. And I thought that was probably more dark and more extreme than killing her off. We've seen in Disney films, I mean, characters, parents being killed off. The Queen and Snow White, and I mean, they allude to Geppetto being killed off as well, and we've seen it with like I think Cinderella as well. I don't know, but I thought that was really, really well done. Like, it was more extreme, sort of the fact that Dumbo can still have contact with Mrs. Jumbo, but not really, because they're separated by prison bars. I thought that was really, really well done.
Yeah, I fully agree. Death is usually presented in these films to make the characters learn something about themselves, learn a lesson. But really, all Dumbo learns is that life is unfair, and
Yeah,
it's kind of a very sad thing,
it is.
like a very sad realization for a kids' film to have.
Yeah, and also like coping with a death, it's sort of more, obviously grief is different for everyone, but in the universe in the universe of the Disney films, that it's the death of a parent is sort of presented as somewhat of a thing that you grieve and you move on from, whereas to be separated from a parent, that's a much more difficult task, it seems.
Yeah, the death is sort of character building, whereas the you know knowing that your mom's out there and not being able to see her is
Exactly,
just
but
devastating.
completely,
And you
completely,
kind of just unable to move forward as a character. And then
definitely.
obviously through the help of his piece of shit quote unquote best friend, he learns stuff about himself and improves. And we'll
Yeah.
talk about that piece of garbage later on.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, when we were talking about sort of the childish tone of the film and it's sort of being presented through sort of quite like quite a juvenile, naive perspective of the world, namely the depiction of the storks bringing the babies. The main stork that we see is voiced by the same actor that originally voiced Winnie the Pooh,
Oh, cool, cool.
and he very nearly many times lets a newborn fall through a cloud to its death, like inches from death.
Inches from death. Inches from death. I didn't know he was voiced by the original Winnie the Pooh actor. That's really fascinating. I'm a huge fan of the Winnie the Pooh animation.
Yeah, like yeah, he has sort of this very very easily identifiable like dreary tone, like, oh Piglet,
Oh, yeah.
fucking life is fucking like uh
Could you say
I
that
mean,
again, please? Please.
uh, no. Well, like there'll be plenty of impressions once we start talking about the Winnie the Pooh
Oh, I
films,
can't wait.
which are coming soon enough.
Is that in Disney?
Yeah,
Is that a Disney
I
film?
think that he's an incredibly interesting character. Yes, Matthew.
Is Winnie the Pooh Disney? Is
What
it?
did you say? Yeah, Winnie the Pooh's Disney.
I
Yeah,
did
of
not know
course.
that. So is
Yeah.
like, what
Uh,
are you talking about, like the Heffalump and stuff?
well, like there's a couple of films. You know, there's an early Winnie the Pooh film. I would say in the Walt Disney Animation Studios, there's probably
Oh, cool, cool. That'd
three
be
Winnie
great.
the Pooh
I
films, and
love the
then in
Winnie the Pooh film.
Disney Toons, there's like five or six, and that's like the Tigger movie,
Oh
like
yeah,
Piglet's big movie, the
yeah.
Heffalump, all that shit. So
Awesome.
like we'll get onto
Oh
that
yeah.
fun later.
Happy
Uh,
days. I didn't know.
I'm sure that'll be quite an in-depth conversation, as they're all sort of metaphors for different forms of mental illness.
Oh yeah,
So
man.
I presume that'll probably be a heavy conversation
Yeah,
when we do have that.
completely, man. Completely.
Yes. So obviously, Dumbo is brought by the stork. He is shown to have big ears, and that for some
Lovely.
reason doesn't sit right with people. And I'm incredibly confused because it's not like he has something abnormal on his head. It's just what's meant to be there is slightly big, and they
Yeah,
completely ostracize him from elephant society. They decide that he is not worthy to be part of their their creed. Their species. They vote him out of being an elephant,
yeah. Like, if anything, he should be empowered
king of
by
the
his
elephants.
features. Like,
Yeah,
I think he looks cool. I think he looks cool, and it's a sort of similar thing that goes on in our society, in the sense that I've watched a few documentaries about, like, world's tallest people and stuff, and how a lot of people seem to treat them with disgust in a way, like, oh, you're so tall, you're inhuman, you're not human. Like, I think that's quite insulting to those people, because they have the same, they have the same air in their lungs as everyone else does, and they've still got the same body parts that just happen to be a bit bigger. Like, I feel bad for those people, because they definitely get a hard time of it.
Yeah, and clearly, if humans are capable of growing to that size, they have achieved maximum human
Yeah,
like capacity. So like that, you know, with sheer more body mass, like I mean, if you're a tall, nice person, you're a better person than like an average type, an average heighted dickhead. So I mean,
yeah, exactly.
you live your life.
Exactly.
Tall people. I assume did that touch on like Robert Wadlow?
Yeah, he's one of the most interesting guys ever. It seems like I was watching a documentary on Robert Wadlow and stuff, and like I think he was like 8'11", man. He was huge, and
Yeah, it was
like
mad.
the photos of him. He was so tall, and he seemed like a really. I
Yeah.
think they called him the gentle giant in Illinois. Like he seemed like a really genuinely lovely guy, and it's sad that he passed away so young. I think he died of like a foot infection or leg infection at like 23. Man, it's crazy.
Yeah, it was mad. I think he was something like 6 foot when he was 9 years old or something
Yeah,
crazy. Like
yeah, I know.
he was huge. But yeah, I listened to a podcast about him, and he's an incredibly interesting guy.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know what it is? I think it's because he was. I think like people of his stature, like I think he died of like a blister in his foot. But because I suppose because of his stature, the blister must have been really badly infected and must have been huge because he's like 8'11". So
Yeah, yeah,
like that must have been an incredibly sore and painful life as well. Just in the bones alone, man. Is.
yeah. He had to use a cane and then eventually a wheelchair just because pain existence was
Oh
pain, and
yeah.
it's horrible to see that
It is, man.
such a good person is just taken down by genetics,
Absolutely,
and
man.
for him to be treated so badly, without even the consideration of like how he feels as a person.
Oh yeah.
Like people can be awful,
I know, man, and it's really
and
sad because
that's fully evident.
like it's not his fault. He was just born that way. Like it's not something he can change. Like it is. It's sort of heartbreaking as well because, as you said, man, he seemed like a really really nice guy as well. And I think he did a lot for the community. It seemed so. Good on him.
Yeah, and a huge parallel to that is in this
Oh
film,
yeah, man,
where
completely.
despite all the discrimination that Jumbo Junior faces, he still perseveres and is an upstanding member of the community and shows the bitter old ladies up,
Completely,
and
buddy.
proves to them that he deserves he deserves the respect of the community much more than they do.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, buddy. Completely.
And I alluded to the fact that I'm not a fan of Timothy. Is it Timothy P. Mouse or some shit?
Yeah, something like
Uh, he's an absolute garbage human, and we'll get on to that for like it's not just my bitter opinion. There are perfectly valid
oh yeah, yeah,
reasons when we
oh
talk
yeah, yeah,
about sort of the racism later on.
yeah.
But if Timothy really considered, he calls himself Dumbo's best friend. If he really was his friend, he wouldn't be calling him, by his derogatory nickname.
Yeah, you call him Jumbo Junior, right?
Yeah, every day that he references him, he says like, "Oh, what are you up to, Dumbo? Why you sad, Dumbo?" I'm like, I fucking wonder why.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I know.
the people that I've liked most in life are the people who like heard me being called a nickname and then chose to call me by my real name,
I
because I'm
always
like,
remember that.
well, you clearly,
I always remember you did that for me. Like people used to call me Jeffrey, and you were like the only person who called me Matthew, and I really I'll never forget that. Never forget that.
it's just I've never understood nicknames that aren't affectionate or kind or an inside joke. It's just people putting like an arbitrary thing, and it's off, or it's sexist, or it's rude. There's
Yeah,
always some underlying thing if they just don't respect you enough to call you by your own name, and
exactly.
that's fully evident in this film and rife in society.
Oh yeah,
So if you're gonna give someone a nickname, make it nice. Like all those times I've called you a dickhead, I'm a wonderful guy.
but that's an inside joke. That's funny. You see, that's good.
That's
That's
an inside joke
yeah.
of me being a dickhead.
No, no.
Yeah,
But like I think yeah, it's a similar thing. Like nicknames can go really far. Like and they can develop into really. I mean, in terms of like racism, and we'll get onto racism in the film. Like nicknames can develop into really bad racial slangs and slurs for people, and just, like imagine how bad that must be as well. And like it is quite sad that no one does call Dumbo by his real name, and even by the end, like in the sort of the newspaper as well, and how it's publicized, they just call him Dumbo. Still,
yeah. I wish that the film had been called Jumbo Junior, and then Dumbo is a derogatory film used throughout a derogatory name used throughout the film, and then the end he moves past that and returns to his own self, you know, as a character arc.
Yeah.
So I was also sad to see that, you know, he just, I mean, I suppose it's nice to see that he embraces it and, you know,
Yeah.
makes it his own.
Yeah.
You know, as some people often do with nicknames. But you know, for me, it would just be too insulting to have, you know, my reputation forever associated with something that, you know, dragged me down for so
Yeah.
long.
I completely agree, man. Completely agree.
Yes. So there's a big spectacle within the film, within the circus, where seven elephants are stacked on top of each
Yeah.
other, and Dumbo is expected to leap on top of them. Do they really not consider stacking seven elephants a big enough spectacle? Like, do they really need an
I know.
unrehearsed climax?
I know, and like the elephants clearly are very uncomfortable during that scene. Like they're fumbling all over the place, and it seems very unsafe because like like I think 7 elephants, that's a pretty good feat. Like if I saw elephants at the circus, 1 elephant enough is pretty cool. 7 on top of each other, that's pretty great. You know?
Yeah. And like, did not one idiot think of the idea to tie Dumbo's ears back? You know, like they're literally dragging along with his feet, and he's tripping right before he's meant to do this death-defying stunt that could easily kill all of these elephants. And we
Yeah.
see that they're all horribly injured. And you know, not one person thought to do it. Like
Yeah.
later, you know, they go on to give him elaborate clown makeup, but they can't like tie a fucking
At
shoestring
least
around
give
his
him a
ears.
head or something, you know?
Yeah, like you can do something.
Yeah, exactly. I felt you do feel bad for Dumbo because it sort of feels, you know, especially when his reveal at the circus, it is so cute, but it's you can tell he's so afraid as well. So it kind of makes me feel bad for him.
Yeah. And Matthew, I think I've saved the real big question for right now.
Oh yes,
You know when you normally store your hallucinogens, do you normally put them outside in a bucket for anyone to drink?
all the time.
Yeah,
What
I
about
mean
you?
that's just the go-to, right? You know, uh, sharing is
All the
caring.
time. Yeah,
I mean,
sure. Yes.
we're never told whose they are, and it's just a liquid of hallucinogens.
Yeah.
Like, had someone just tripped and fallen and dropped like a ton of Molly into it?
Yeah. Sharon is Karen, man. Sharon is Karen. God, this film is so weird.
It is so weird. And that you know scene where they're tripping balls is incredible. I have to say, you know, we see the visuals of the pink elephant parade
So good.
as they refer to it, and
So
I think it's genuinely visually incredible.
That's my favorite scene in the film for me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there aren't many other highlights, you know.
Yeah,
Uh,
the bucket of hallucinogens. That's iconic in itself, really.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, did you want to address sort of the more controversial aspects of the film?
Yeah, like so I kind of yeah, so one of my notes here was like how do you feel about the racial stereotypes that are outdated regarding the crows of the film? Because you know, I'm not aware of has it received a lot of criticism? And I'd imagine it has. I'd imagine it has. But I've never you know I've never seen this film, and I was aware of like iconic scenes of like Dumbo flying, but I was never aware of this. What can you tell
Yes.
me, man? What do you how do you feel about it?
Well, so you know the racial views that are presented in this film are not only outdated; they should have never existed. You know,
Yeah,
these are it's horrible to ever condemn someone for something so uncontrollable. Uh, this film has a series of uh, characters who are presented as crows, voiced by black actors. I actually thought before I saw this film, I knew that this scene was controversial. People had called for it to be, you know, taken out of versions. You know, called to have this edited before it was put on Disney Plus. But you know, they decided to just put the unedited cut, and we've talked about that earlier in the
yeah,
podcast as to whether you know that holds more merit than just not having it on, or
sure.
whether having a censored version is better. You know, if you want to hear about that, we talked about it at the start. Uh, so to my surprise, you know, I started to watch the scene, and I expected the racist side of it. I expected, you know, the characters to be presented as, you know, black stereotypes, but I assumed that they would be voiced by white actors,
Yeah,
and I was actually surprised to find out that they were voiced by black voice actors. You know, I watched the scene, you know, waiting to see where in where the racism lied.
sure.
and there are sort of a couple of elements of it. One is that it's their presentation of being crows, which is it's meant to be an ironic reference to Jim Crow and
Yeah,
those American voting laws.
yeah, we mentioned that. We cover that in politics? Because I thought like crows, and then one of the crows is called Jim, I think. So the Jim Crow, we could
Yes.
cover that in politics, didn't we?
Yeah, so those were voting related laws for black people, and apparently back in this era, Jim Crow was also sometimes used as a pejorative phrase for black people. So that inherently is racist.
Yeah,
To give a character that name at that time,
yeah,
that is inherently racist.
absolutely.
So there's that level of it, and also the fact that one of the heroes of the film, or presented as such, which is Timothy, also tells them to go back to their tree, which comes off as a very racist metaphor of the
Back to
idea
where you
of
came from, sort of idea.
telling immigrants to go back to their country.
Yeah,
That came off as very distasteful.
absolutely.
Uh, so yeah, it wasn't the racism didn't lie in what I expected, but it was also very sad to see a character presented as a hero portray such unadmirable views, especially as we see the crows do tease Dumbo, but I would say they tease him less than the average elephant. And Timothy seems to only blow up at these characters, and that
Exactly.
comes across as very problematic because these are one of the only portrayals of black characters within the film.
Yeah,
So yes, it is an incredibly problematic scene, and it was upsetting to watch at points. How did
I
you
think you've hit the
feel?
nail on the head there, buddy. And also, aren't the crows like smoking cigars and stuff as well? And there's nothing wrong with
Yeah,
smoking.
there are certainly some racist stereotypes where they're calling each other brother, and they're doing
Yeah,
it's associated with a gang mentality, and they're meant to be picking on Dumbo, but they actually turn out to be helpful characters and friends to Dumbo. So I appreciated that element, but to sort of present them as sort of a hateful gang initially that
distasteful.
are by this film's sense of morals, that's excusable for like Timothy to tell them to go back to their tree. It comes off as a very distasteful,
Absolutely.
problematic metaphor.
I think you
So
hit the
yeah,
nail
so
on the
what
head
it
there, buddy.
was upsetting to watch,
It was, and
especially as this is meant to be such a family friendly film. To give that sort of view and have that association with children, it's inherently very problematic.
absolutely. But I think if Callum, I think you've absolutely nailed it there, buddy. And you know what it is like, the film. It didn't necessarily tarnish my view of the film, but it definitely. Well, I suppose it actually did make me tarnish my view of the film, to be honest. And it is definitely more relevant today with everything that's going on in society at the minute. And it's very distasteful. I think that's definitely the right word for it, and it's very insensitive. And I actually can't tell if it's intentional or not. I think it's so obvious that it is intentional to have. I think that it is intentional.
Yeah, I mean, there are some
I hope
people
it's
who would
not,
probably
but
excuse it as the thought of the times, but they're disgusting thoughts of the times.
yeah,
To negatively associate black people,
completely.
with criminal acts, or bullying, and any negative treatment to people who aren't like them, and to
Yeah,
have one of the main characters of the film treat them so poorly.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a really awful portrayal. And I didn't really see the ramifications until we started talking about it just a few minutes ago, because just thinking on it sort of retroactively, it really tarnishes the reputation of the film for me. And I do think, I mean, it must be intentional for the only black voice actors in the film to be voicing these characters, and them put them
yeah.
in this situation. Like, it has to be intentional.
Has to be. Yeah. And like, you know what, Colin, it kind of got me thinking, like, no wonder racism is ingrained in our society if animate kids animated films are just showing it so blatantly and like sort of outlining that it's okay. It's it sort of gets me
Yeah.
thinking, like, it is it I don't question at films, but that sort of bit, it did sort of, it kind of annoyed me.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much you either see, two views of black people, in media. It's either a criticism of black people, it's there's overt racism, or it's just that they're treated as, you know, they're treated as equal. It's normalized, but you know, it shouldn't just be normalized. Like, you know, black actors or actors of color, you know, they should be celebrated. They should be a huge part of the story. You know, it should be showing the lives and their stories.
Yeah.
And media, you know, mass media just hasn't done that enough. You know,
No, not at
they
all.
show like white heroes with, you know, people of color like supporting the story, and they've just not done enough. You know, the things that have hit us so popularly. You know, Disney is probably like the biggest franchise to have ever existed, and you know, for one of its first ever films, you know, establishing its brand to be so problematic, shows that, you know, that they were clearly trying to indoctrinate this behavior into the next generation. And
Absolutely.
yeah, it's really deeply problematic.
I think the film industry is getting better with you know, providing more like headlining roles for black actors. You know, we've seen Black Panther. It's a tremendous success, and it's one of the most successful Disney films of all time. So you'd think Disney, you know, you'd think Disney would think, okay, here's an idea. How about we promote these young black actors and we sort of acknowledge their talent more? But you know, when films like Dumbo are so well regarded, yeah, it just it's beggars belief, really, man. Because like I think don't get me wrong, I do think Disney is getting better with this. You know, we've seen John Boyega in the Star Wars films, and we've seen Chadwick Boseman, we've seen Anthony Mackie in the MCU, and there's so many other examples there. But like you said, you know, it's tough even to, you know, for Disney to cross the barrier of having a black actor headline their own movie. Like Falcon and Winter Soldier, that's a black actor co-starring with a white actor, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's sort of a similar thing that you said. Like it's a hard boundary to cross. Like there's always has to be a white actor leading it as well. Like even John Boyega as Finn in the Star Wars films, they're not his films.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And that's not
yeah,
necessarily
like
a criticism of that, but it's just that it's there. It's subtle. You know what I mean?
you undoubtedly need a balance of, you know, films that, you know, have all ethnicities leading or supporting,
Yeah.
you know, because that's real life. You know, you need to show, you need to have realism,
Yeah.
and you need to have balance. You know, we just do need to see more fully led films of actors of color.
Completely. But I think you hit the nail on the head there, pal. Honestly, that's another really interesting discussion there, because I'll definitely time code these. You know, for more in depth, for the more in depth discussions we've had, I'll time code them if people want to check them out individually. You know, but have you got any other points about the film, dude? Because just after the scene with the crows, there is a pretty great song in there, like "When I See an Elephant Fly." It's one of my favorites as well. I haven't looked too much in the lyrics of that. I'm not sure if that's like culturally insensitive or not, but as a tune, I enjoyed it. And obviously, you know, when Dumbo is flying, it's so iconic in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And just sort of my final thought in the film was, again, the deeply problematic character of Timothy,
Oh yeah,
just once again proving that he's not Dumbo's friend. You know, he uses him for clout. You know,
yeah,
he points off the back of Dumbo to become his manager, to then sign like, you know, a Hollywood movie deal. You know, he clearly doesn't act out of empathy for Dumbo or selflessness. You know, it's clearly a selfish agenda throughout, and I feel like I feel like he should be lauded as, you know, one of Disney's biggest villains.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
rather than, you know, one of its, you know, co-leading heroes.
Yeah, it's such a strange depiction as well. And it is so on the nose as well that, you know, an elephant's best friend is a mouse. You know, the sort of,
Yes.
because there's I don't know, it is on the nose, and I suppose that's part of the charm there. But yeah, Timothy, I never clicked with him like I did with Jiminy Cricket. You know, Jiminy Cricket is generally speaking, quite a nice guy. He is generally a moral compass. I mean, we've talked about the breaking and entering bit, of course,
Yeah.
but he's generally quite good. He's quite a
Yes.
kind-hearted cricket. Timothy, not so much.
No, and especially because he is a co-star with Dumbo, but
Yeah,
he's also the only lead character that talks. So
great point.
to present this as, you know, a good guy's story where the only good guy, allegedly good guy that talks, is also racist and selfish,
Yeah,
or, you know, at least embodies you know, like, you know, a metaphor of racial hatred, it seems.
yeah,
You know, to have that be, you know, the mouthpiece for the audience, you know, the main character that we're meant to empathize with and see as, you know, us on the screen.
Yeah,
Like
exactly,
it
buddy.
feels
Exactly.
dramatically.
It does. It does. Did you have any concluding points in the film there, bud? Because I think we went really in depth there. I thought that was really great.
Yeah, that's all from me.
No worries.
I'd
I'd
love
love
to
to
hear
hear
your
your
rating of the film.
well, okay. For me, I would say enjoyment. Probably the most enjoyable experience I had today. I think it was an 8.5. That being said, the topics and the themes, the more complex themes we've talked about, I think for quality, I I think it's a bit lower than enjoyment. Strangely enough, I would say maybe like a 7. It's a 7 maybe, and that's because I would say of the controversy that surrounds a lot of the stereotypes there for me. And it's a very difficult film to rate because I think if you remove the crows as a characters, this film is way better.
Yes.
What would you?
Uh, well, I would say that my enjoyment of the film was significantly lower than yours. You know, I find it incredibly dull. Dumbo as a non-speaking character, yes, that's interesting, but you know, I sort of have an aversion to that kind
Yeah,
of character.
I get you.
Obviously, Timothy, uh, you know, in my mind, is an immoral character, so I didn't like seeing him used as, you know, the vocal character of the film.
I respect
You know,
that.
that I really didn't enjoy that. The animation is obviously incredible, as per the rest of Disney's filmography. The music's great, probably the best of Disney up until this point.
I agree.
If you
I
don't
agree.
include Fantasia, because you know Fantasia is it's orchestral music. You know, it's not lyrical.
Sure.
So these are probably the best lyrical songs that we've seen
Yeah.
in Disney at this point. So I did enjoy it to some degree, especially like as you said, the hallucination scene with the pink elephant
Oh, so
parade.
good. So good, man.
You said was your favorite scene in the film.
Absolutely.
I would have to agree. So I'd say my enjoyment of the film was probably a
I
five
respect
or a
that. Yeah.
6. And yeah, the fact that, you know, Timothy is presented as a good character and he's, you know, regarded as a hero of this film, and you know the deep set uh it, you know, moral issues with their presentation of the crows, you know, significantly drops it in quality for me.
I respect
So
that. Yeah.
I would say, you know, for thematically it's pretty much a 0, and then if you add in the quality of the music, the quality of the animation, quality, I'd say I'd have to give it like a 5 probably.
Yeah, no, I thought that was great. It is definitely important to address the thematic review of it as well. Like you said, it's very it's very poor. It's very distasteful. We've definitely covered that, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there completely, Callum. I thought that was great. It's a difficult film. It's a really difficult film to review because of the controversy that surrounds it, and I don't know how they handled that in the live action remake. Whether they just completely removed other characters and like that, like the
Yeah,
crows. Yeah.
they removed Timothy and they removed the crows,
Oh, there you
and
go.
then
Yeah, it
like,
solves a lot.
they somehow managed to double the runtime of this film. Like it's an hour and 56. So they added in a ton of human characters to try and you know, flesh out the runtime really.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely cover that in a later episode, won't we? Yeah.
Hopefully so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, man. I suppose that leaves us to wrap up the episode and then talk about our future podcast that we have planned for next week. If you want to let the
Yeah.
viewers know,
Sure.
go for it, man.
So our next episode that we'll hopefully be covering, we're trying to do a bit of variations. You know, every other episode is live action, and then the next episode is animation. And we're as we said, we're currently working through the Disney Animated Studios filmography, and we're hoping to do, you know, some thematic episodes, because we probably have our most fun in the thematic episodes, say like unconventional romances and all the romantique, the romantic films linked to that.
I agree.
But you
Yeah.
know, I sort of find myself, you know, I kind of like to have a bit of balance on the show, you know, between good
Sure.
films and bad films. But obviously, you know, when we're doing thematic episodes, obviously there's something deep down in me that just wants to watch good films. So I
Yeah.
sort of,
I
you know,
get you. I get you.
always recommend that we watch some good films. So I thought a good film series to cover, you know, an incredibly popular film series to cover would be Jurassic Park.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely. I'll be
I
fine.
don't know if you've seen any of those. Have you?
Strangely, no. I remember I was huge back in the dinosaurs, and like when I was like 14, 15. And strangely, I haven't seen it. I've got them actually. I do. I think I have them all on DVD in the house somewhere. But
Oh, that would be great. So you don't have to keep buying movies on YouTube.
But you know what it is, man? Like we've watched some great movies recently, haven't we? Like the unconventional romances. I think you gave it a 40 out of 40 for the first time, which
I
was
did, yes.
Back to the Future is another classic franchise we've done. So, like you said, I suppose we're trying to broaden our horizons with more classic franchises. Like we've mentioned Back to the Future as well. You know, we've done Marvel, DC, we've done all that. We've done Fox Marvel movies. You know, so I think now, as you said, great time to branch out into classic series like Jurassic Park.
Yeah, and I thought, whenever we cover a franchise, there's obviously going to be some highs and lows, and I think that there are some, from what I've heard, some low lows in Jurassic Park.
Oh
So
yeah,
I thought it'd be
yeah,
interesting. I hope it's at least a fun mess. I think it's either I think it's the third one that people
yeah.
don't
I
really
think
connect
so.
with.
Yeah, I think.
So I hope it's at least a fun mess rather than just dull and dreary, meandering plot.
Yeah, man. So, yeah, Jurassic Park should be up. I would say midweek. Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever. Maybe like Wednesday, Thursday, or something between Tuesday and Thursday, I'd imagine. And
That
then
vibe, that general vibe.
that general vibe, and then part two of Disney will probably be either late. Yeah, probably like next like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'd imagine. So at that time. But
Yeah.
yeah. Do you want to wrap up the episode then? But do you want me to wrap up the episode, or do you want to wrap it up?
Yep, sure. Go ahead.
All right, so yeah, thank you very much, Callum, for today. I had a great time recording with you. I thought it was a humorous, but also like a sort of in-depth chat about a lot of topics there. So I was fun.
Yeah, it was great depth to it. Good hearing that you fancied Stephanie off Lazy Town. That was riveting.
And you with Kim Possible. You with Kim Possible, classic. Yeah, thank you very much, Callum. Thank you very much for everyone who supported us. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Email us with any questions or podcast suggestions at moviematespodcast@gmail.com. Callum and I will always be there to answer those. And yeah, hope you're all safe and well. Hope your family and friends are all safe and well. And take care, guys, and bye-bye. See you, Callum.
Bye bye.